Yeah. We're good to go? All right. Good evening. I would like to call the caucus meeting of the County Council for Monday, July 11th to order. Would you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll? And as she calls the roll, would you announce that you are present and that you are either in council chambers or online? This is a hybrid meeting, therefore we do have people who are online.
Chairman Passman.
Present and in council.
Vice Chair Somerville.
Present online.
Councilmember Glover.
President in council.
Councilmember Hervishon.
Present in chambers.
Councilmember Rodman.
Present here.
Councilmember Howard.
Present here.
Councilmember Lawson.
Mark Lawson, present here.
Councilmember McEllen.
Present online.
Councilmember Dawson. Councilmember Flewelling.
Present online.
And Councilmember Cunningham.
Present and in chambers.
Okay, we do have a quorum to conduct the business of County Council. Public notice of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And before we get too far, I'm going to ask us to take item number 6 and move it up to item number 5 so that our senator can give us some information. Then we can discuss how we're going to work our agenda moving forward based upon some information he's going to give us. So with that in mind, I'd like an approval of the caucus agenda with switching those two items.
So moved as suggested.
I'll second.
All right, duly moved and seconded to rearrange the agenda as presented. Do I hear any objections? Without objections, the agenda will be approved as amended. Now I need to approve the amended agenda. May I have a motion to do that? Mr. Rodman makes the motion to approve the amended agenda.
I'll second again for you.
It is duly moved and seconded to approve the amended agenda. This will be done without objection, and I see no objections. With that in mind, we are at the discussion items, and I would ask Senator Davis to come forward to make a presentation. Senator Davis, welcome again.
Thank you. I'm bringing with me an important colleague.
Yes.
Representative Erickson, who in fact chairs the subcommittee on Ways and Means through which SCDOT appropriations are made. So I think it's going to be particularly germane to our conversation today.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was here, I guess, was it a couple weeks ago?
Yes.
I mean, days were running together.
Hold on a second. Online, can you hear the senator?
Can't hear. No.
Okay, hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear now?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. When I was here a couple weeks ago, we had a wide-ranging discussion regarding the transportation sales tax proposal, the green space sales tax proposal, and there were a couple of outstanding questions that I promised to get back to you and report on. The first of which was, what was the possibility of some of the items that you all were thinking about having funded through the penny sales tax for transportation? What was going to be the chances of having some of that money handled through the SCDOT, whether or not it's in regard to the new recurring appropriation we gave to SCDOT so we could draw down all the federal infrastructure money, whether it was in regard to $1 billion that's being placed in a contingency reserve fund for appropriation next year. any and all of the above. The thinking was that with that sort of state and federal money available, and with Secretary Hall in the process of updating the statewide capital improvement projects list, that there might be an opportunity to focus on some critical transportation needs to be funded out of that money. And in particular, looking at what the capital improvement plan that Secretary Hall is working on, the things she gives most priority to are things regarding safety. And so, working with asking the chairman and asking the manager, I wanted a list of those things that related to evacuation routes and transportation safety. And sent a letter, which I believe I've copied all of you with, in regard to the possibility of making improvements to 4 evacuation routes in southern Beaufort County. Worked with Representative Erickson today on a similar letter for northern Beaufort County to improve the evacuation route in northern Beaufort County. It's my understanding that primarily in northern Beaufort County, it has to do with expanding the Chowan Creek Bridge and also a section of 21 heading to where there are some planned expansions already where Walmart is on Ladies Island. Following up with Secretary Hall, and I believe some members of council may have talked to her, I'm under no illusions that 100% of that money is going to get funded. You've got 46 other counties, you've got 170 state lawmakers. However, there is a very high likelihood that some of that money can be found through those state appropriations. So I thought that was a helpful level of due diligence for this council to go through as it's contemplating going to get local money for those routes. It seems that exhausting due diligence in regard to what can be handled through state money would allow you to get to a delta that then needs to be handled by local funds. So I did some diligence in that regard, and Representative Erickson is here today as well, particularly important because she does chair the Ways and Means Subcommittee, and she can speak to some of those state appropriation matters as well. The second thing was in regard to some questions that the county attorney had about the mechanics of how the green space program would work. There is some language in this local option sales tax for green space that's in addition to the usual language you typically see in local option sales tax referendums. And the reason for that is this. For instance, the penny sales tax for transportation that you're contemplating, if you went to the voters with a referendum, you would list on there the various projects that you intended to fund out of that money. The green space money is somewhat different in that you're raising money for the general overall purpose of preservation procurements, but you don't know in advance what those tracts of land or easements or fee simple titles are going to be. It's the nature of things that you raise the money, then you go out into the marketplace and you find out what a willing buyer and a willing seller, how you can structure the transactions. Because of the lack of specificity in regard to you can't list projects to put on a referendum, there is an additional provision in the green space that calls for there to be an advisory committee that's appointed by this county council, which will then work with the DOR for the limited purpose of providing oversight or an assurance that the money has in fact been used for the purposes specified in the statute. In other words, it has in fact gone for preservation procurements. There's a situation right now up in Richland County where the proceeds of a local option sales tax went for things other than what was contemplated. So because of the open-ended nature of this, in terms of you don't know yet what lands are being acquired, that's why that additional language is in there in regard to the advisory committee, in regard to the DOR. Now, there was a question from the county attorney as to what level of involvement would DOR have in providing that certification or providing that level of oversight. And I provided a letter, solicited a letter from Hartley Powell, who's the director of Department of Revenue, actually from their general counsel, saying that DOR would handle this local option sales tax for green space like they do anything else. It would collect the money, remit it to the county. The only extra layer would be that whatever committee this county council appointed to make recommendations in regard to preservation procurements, once that went back to county council and you guys gave final blessing on, yes, this is in fact, we want to acquire this piece of land or acquire this easement for this amount of money, that then would be reviewed by the advisory committee and the DOR to confirm that the money was going for preservation purposes. So it would be an administrative layer on top of it. So there was some confusion as to whether or not that advisory committee was going to be the entity that actually made the preservation procurements, or whether it had final authority in that regard, or whether it was going to substitute its judgment instead of Beaufort County Council. That isn't the case. It's simply in regard to, let me take you through an example. Say a tract of land with the Cooler's property out there by Oldfield. Say that was identified by whatever committee the county council decided to appoint to make preservation recommendations, and it went to Beaufort County Council for final approval, because you guys would have final say. Say you then approve that. That would then go to the Department of Revenue for confirmation that, yes, the money that you intend to use here for this purpose is within the meaning of this statute. In other words, it's for procurement, it's for preservation, it's for conservation. The advisory committee and the DOR would sign off on that, and then the green light would then be given to the county to actually follow through on that acquisition. So I received an opinion from DOR's general counsel in that regard to answer those questions. Also in regard to the plenary authority of county council to make the final decisions in regard to procurements, I got a letter from the clerk to the Senate saying this is exactly how it's supposed to work. The county is the entity with the final authority. So with that by way of background, it's kind of technical, Mr. Chairman, but there were those questions that arose, and so tried to answer those questions, and happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure Representative Erickson would be.
Okay. All right. Questions?
I still have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the use of the funds. I have a real problem with using tax dollars for lease agreements. I've seen that backfire in other states where USDA partnered with the state and also the military to buy a 10-year lease on agricultural land, and then as soon as those 10 years were up, the property was sold.
Yes, ma'am.
Or to protect wetlands too. So
Yes,
I just have that section 4-10-1010. And then it also states.
Can I respond to that before you go to the next one?
Okay.
If you look at the referendum question, it lists the 7 or 8 different things that can be done with the money, leases being one of them. The operative word there is or, okay? So you can do any or all of those. You don't have to do all of them. You can pick any one of those things. And then the second thing would be ultimate authority in regard to what you want to do with the money is reserved under this council. I mean, so it's not as if you're turning it over to a committee with a charge to go out there and lease land. I mean, all they're going to do is whatever decision you make, the county council makes in regard to expenditure of those monies, their limited role is saying, yes, in fact, these dollars are going for one of these procurements that are authorized in that statute. So if leases are not desirable as a public policy, and I take your point, Ms. Howard, that would be something that this county council would not have to approve. And I suspect, given the way you feel about it and given your ability to make that case to the council, I would suspect that wouldn't be one of the things that was adopted.
I'm not clear that we would have that option to. I understand what you're saying, but I'm still not clear about that. And then the committee to act as the advisory distribution of the funds, you cleared up a lot of my questions on that. But who appoints that committee? The legislative body?
Beaufort County Council does.
And does it have to be made up in the way that it's described in the statute?
Yeah, that particular 7-member advisory committee, for the limited purposes of making sure that what county council does with the money conforms with the statute, that would be appointed by Beaufort County Council. And those, I guess it was 1 member of county council, 1 member of the delegation, 1 member who's familiar with geography, and then 4 lay people.
And then one more who's knowledgeable about the geography and condition of the county's land, which is, to me, vague.
But the point I'd like to make is that the role of that advisory committee is simply as sort of a diligence to make sure that, yes, in fact, county council is using that money for preservation purposes. And again, the reason that was added in there is because you don't, unlike with the penny sales tax, you don't have listed up front exactly what that money is going to go for. So it's a little more open-ended, right? So there was a need for a little bit more assurance that the money was actually being used for the purpose that the statute provides. In regard to your first concern, in regard to the plenary power of the county, the legal opinion from the clerk of the Senate is in regard to what authority does the county have, okay? This money is accruing for the benefit of Beaufort County for the purpose provided in the statute. You've got the authority to appoint the committee, you've got the authority to approve any recommendations by that committee, and you can direct that committee to be whoever you want it to be, working in conjunction with whomever you want it to work with, whether it be the Rural and Critical Lands Board, or the Open Land Trust, or the Coastal Conservation League, whatever degree of diligence gives you all comfort. But at the end of the day, it would be Beaufort County Council through, readings that would have to approve the actual purchases. And I knew that was a concern, Ms. Howard, so that's why I had that legal opinion issued, because I wanted to be able to reassure you guys that Beaufort County Council was the one signing off on this. So if you don't like leases, it's not going to be leases. If you don't like a certain tract, you don't approve that tract. So you have plenary authority in that regard.
Okay, I had another question. It wasn't clear to me that the funds couldn't be collected by all 7 local entities equally, and they could make the decisions, and the county would not have any voice or oversight in that. But I think you cleared up that a little bit. But,
and it's a fair question, because the way it was, and it is unusual, because you're not used to seeing this layer of oversight in your local option sales tax referendum. It's kind of a new wrinkle. And the reason for that is, as I said before, unlike other local option sales taxes, this one is prospective in nature and identifying what you're going to do with the money. What tracts are you going to get, what easements, what fee simple. And so that's why you have this extra layer of this advisory committee saying, okay, we see what the council is proposing here. Yes, we certify the money's going for these preservation purposes and not for some other thing. So I attempted to address what role the advisory committee plays with DOR. It's sort of like an administrative oversight, but the authority in regard to identifying tracts, whether it be leases, whether it be fee simple, whether it be conservation easement, whatever it is, that lies with Beaufort County Council. You're the entity with plenary authority here.
I'm just not sure that's what I read enabling in the statute. That's my, I appreciate your opinion that you got from DOR, but
and from the clerk to the Senate in regard to what the statute says, what the statute means, and I was specific in regard to, let me know where plenary authority lies. Let me know who has final authority in regard to where does this money go, what interests are being purchased. And if you look at the opinion that was issued, it's explicit in that regard, that Beaufort County Council is the entity that has a right to make those decisions. And the role that DOR and the advisory committee plays is simply to confirm that the money's being used for preservation purposes and not for some other thing that's not authorized by the statute.
I guess I have a question. This may be for the administration or our attorney. Would we in fact be able, the county, to appoint that advisory committee, or would the state legislators be appointing them?
No, that's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon. How are you? I believe the county council appoints the advisory committee.
Advisory committee.
That's the way I read the statute.
And that's fairly
And that
explicit.
makeup is set by statute on who
That
those
makeup
are.
is
It would
determined.
be
You-
and this is another issue I have, is 2 elected officials on it, a state legislator and a.
Yes.
Because elected officials have undue influence
Yes,
on
ma'am.
any committee, either as a county or a state legislator. Those 2, there may be only 2 votes, but they are really more than 2 votes, in my opinion. I've seen that.
No, and I think that's fair, and I would share that concern, Ms. Howard, if in fact this advisory committee was the one making recommendations on tracts of land to purchase, or if they're the ones that had the final authority on deciding what tracts of land to purchase. But their role here, again, is extremely limited. Their role here is simply to certify that what county council has decided through readings and deciding in public session, what they've decided or proposed to do with this money, their role is limited to saying, yes, in fact, this is for conservation and preservation. It's not to build a road, or it's not to build a school, or it's not for some other purpose. It's just there as sort of an auditing function. They don't have policy-making authority. But I would share your concern if it did. And that's why it was important to have the DOR say, In no way do we view that to be our role. We're going to handle this in the same way we do other local option sales taxes. We're going to collect the money, we're going to remit the money to the county. The only thing we're going to do that's different because of this language is when Beaufort County Council says this is what we propose to do with this chunk of money for this land, we're going to certify that it's for preservation purposes and it's not for some other purpose. I mean, it's and the same thing with the advisory committee. That's the only role that it plays. And so that's why I don't have as much concern as I would, like you just voiced, if that advisory committee were the one actually negotiating and deciding on how that money is going to be spent. But that's not the role that it plays here.
I think it's going to be difficult to implement it with all these different things. I mean, I appreciate your explanations.
Yes, ma'am.
It does help me better to understand it, but then I can't help but compare it to our transportation and Greenbelt tax referendum, which seems a lot cleaner and easier to administer to me. So
I think that's a fair point. I mean, and to be fair, or to be completely forthcoming here, this is something brand new for the state of South Carolina. I mean, we'd be the first county to try to do this open space referendum. We'd be the first county to implement it or to discharge it or to fulfill what the statute authorizes if you all decide to do it. And so you're asking good questions. I mean, how is it going to work? Because you're used to looking at something with much specificity. You're saying, all right, in this referendum, we have very listed on here, this highway, this highway, this highway. And I understand that this is different. This is different because you're entrusting into the future that wise decisions are going to be made in regard to that money. I guess the only thing that I would say, Ms. Howard, is that ultimately it's going to be this Beaufort County Council that makes the decisions. And again, the only role the DOR and the advisory committee plays is to simply say, is this going for conservation? Is this going for preservation? Or is it for some other purpose not authorized by the statute? So ultimately, it's going to be in your laps as to how that money is spent.
Okay.
Yes, please, Shannon.
Councilman Howard, if I could interject, that point was debated in the House. And we actually had a lot of discussion and public input that the elected officials on that oversight were the people's elected, serving the people with the money as the focus, as a little bit more accountability than just a citizen who fiscally might not have any accountability for that piece. It was discussed. I agree with Senator Davis in that if they were making decisions on property, it would not have been entertained in the House. It was discussed at length. So the piece was to have those who are appropriating funds and looking at these things on different levels, being county and state, as part of simply a checklist. Did the pieces and parcels that you decide meet the criteria for what you asked for it to do? And that's what they're going to do on that piece. Now, I have no decision for you or opinion on which one you choose. I would also offer the transportation piece. I spoke with Secretary Hall at length. We discussed the level of need in the area and the safety piece being of large concern. So I would tell you that it's on her radar. We have meetings scheduled that we'll follow up with. But Senator Davis and I also spoke today about the Office of Resiliency that we could potentially talk to as well. There are more ways for us to procure funds, and with Senator Davis over in the Senate on the Finance Committee and Representative Herb Kirschman and I serving on Ways and Means, we have the ability to form those groups that will get us to the table with the right people to be able to give us answers and help us work through those processes for whatever funds we can and qualify for. We'd certainly have to apply for them, but I do believe that they meet a good number of the quality issues that they're going to be looking for.
Other questions?
I think one question that I think Paul can probably better express is about the entities and how are they treated, all 7 entities, but if he wants to address that instead of me.
Paul, did you hear that comment?
I did. Yeah, I tried to get my hand up, but anyway, yeah, a couple of things, and Alice kind of alluded to one of them. The specific language in the formation of this committee that we've been talking about a lot is the county in which a referendum is passed shall assemble an advisory committee to assist the Department of Revenue with directing the distribution of taxes collected. And here's the part that's interesting: to ensure a transparent and equal distribution within the county, equal distribution within the county. That raises a whole bunch of questions. And if you read the entire statute, a couple of places in there it refers to governmental units, appropriate governmental units, as opposed to counties. And when I hear that term governmental unit as opposed to counties, and I have to ask myself, well, are they talking about municipalities? Are they talking about special purpose? What are they talking about? And of course, all of the above are mentioned in there. So what's not clear to me is whether this equal distribution refers to north, south, east, and west, which is also spoken to in the statute, or does it refer to municipalities as referred to in the statute in various places? It leaves that question in my mind open for an answer, because I can read this, maybe a little far-fetched, but I can certainly read this statute to say that this committee's job is to make sure that these dollars are distributed to the political entity in which they're collected, i.e. Beaufort, i.e. Port Royal, i.e. Embassy, i.e. Hardyville, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and that they will have the sole responsibility of determining what, if anything, is quote-unquote preserved in their jurisdiction. So that's the first question that I would put out there, because it's just not clear to me. I've read this statute several times, and because when you say, when the statute itself says to ensure equal distribution within the county, and also in the same vein, there's a section in here that talks about what the proceeds can be used for, which they may include preservation procurements located within or without, or both within or without, the boundaries of the local government entities. There we go again, local government entities, including county, municipalities, and special purpose districts. So, I mean, I can read it one way saying it's okay to preserve land in all of those political subdivisions. I can also read it to say that all of those political subdivisions get their pro rata share or whatever's collected within their jurisdiction. And that's just not clear to me.
Respond to that if I could. Mr. Somerville, I think, in regard to the equal distribution language, that doesn't refer to money being repatriated to municipalities in accordance with where dollars were collected. What it refers to is in regard to looking at the county as a whole, that there be an effort on the part of Beaufort County Council when it's making these preservation procurements to be equitable in regard to the areas that it identifies and the areas that it decides to preserve, as opposed to, say, focusing it almost exclusively on one area. That was the reason for that, to ensure some parity or some equitable distribution of funds. It does not refer to any other monies going to any other unit or municipality or governmental entity as having authority. That's fairly clear, I think, in the statute as a whole, reading the statute as a whole, is Beaufort County Council that's authorizing this, Beaufort County Council that's submitting it to a referendum, and as the opinion from the clerk of the Senate says, it's Beaufort County Council that has plenary authority in regard to how that money is spent. The language that you've read in regard to equal distribution throughout whatever the language was, is in regard to, is it being done equitably? And that is for the DOR and the advisory committee to look at, to see whether or not one area of the county is being favored over another. Again, this is something that's new and something that we're trying for the first time. And we've never had a local option sales tax raising, a stream of funds that will be leveraged into bonds that is then going to be spent over a period of time, a 10-year period of time. So it was felt like there needed to be some guidance in regard to how that money was spent. But in terms of equal, meaning going to municipalities or those other governmental units, that's not the way that I think the statute is fairly read. Is that responsive, Ms. Somerville?
It is. I guess what I'm trying to get comfortable with is shall I read this to say that 6 municipalities and their lawyers are going to get in line for their quote-unquote fair share? Or is this going to be this committee deciding, well, they're looking at it east, west, north, south? And by the way, we kind of laughed about that, north, south, east, and west, because we wouldn't know what north, south, east, and west of Beaufort County look like. But no matter whether it's political subdivisions or whether it's geographical areas, the question, I don't think so. I don't think there's any question, given your answer, that this committee is going to make a determination, a subjective determination, at least partially subjective determination on where these funds should be spent. I mean, if I were a lawyer for one of the municipalities, I'd look at this and say, well, wait a second now, we need to get our share according to this. You say no, well, maybe not. One last question is, this portion that I read about within or without the political boundaries of the local government, including the counties, municipalities, and special purpose. I could read that to say we could spend all this money in Hampton County, or some of it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and let me finish up my answer to your first question a little bit better first. I think it's fair to say that in having this advisory committee in the DOR kind of passing upon how you decide to appropriate the money, Beaufort County Council, that Beaufort County Council has to bear in mind as it goes forward with its plan that all areas of the county are treated equitably. I think it's fair to say this is an instructive and a direction. I mean, it's not specific in nature, but it's certainly directive in terms of it's the intention that if this money is being raised countywide, that we want preservation efforts to be made countywide. I mean, so I think that's the purpose of that language. It's instructive. And to your second question, and this question came up as well during a floor debate in the Senate. I'm not sure about the House, but when you look at Beaufort County in particular, and you look at our watershed, and you look at the quality of our rivers, to a material extent, the quality of those rivers is dependent upon what happens in Jasper County. I mean, development at the headwaters of some of these rivers, although it may be in Jasper County, are going to have a material impact on the water quality in Beaufort County. And so by adding the language in the statute that allows, not requires, but allows Beaufort County Council to purchase for preservation purposes land outside of Beaufort County was meant to acknowledge that geological fact, that what happens in Hardyville, or what happens along 278 as you go toward exit 8 and in those headwaters, that has a material impact on the Colleton River and the May River and rivers that are in Beaufort County. So again, that was the intent, Mr. Somerville, was to give this Beaufort County Council latitude so that if there is an opportunity to purchase real property in headwaters that happen to be in Jasper County, that you have the latitude to do so, because the purpose of this statute is to preserve and protect the natural resources of Beaufort County, and that may necessitate going across the county line. Doesn't require you to, but it would allow you to. And then my final comment would be this. This is something brand new. It is something that I think would be groundbreaking. It is something that I think Beaufort County could take the lead on and show the rest of the state. And it may be that through regulation, through DOR, or through amendment in the General Assembly, if given the experiences that Beaufort County Council or Beaufort County has with this, shows that for programs like this to work seamlessly, adjustments are made. I can tell you this passed almost unanimously in the House and the Senate, and it is the will of the General Assembly to empower counties. And so if there are logistical problems or technical problems or things aren't flowing as well, I can tell you, and maybe Representative Erickson can second it, that's not going to be a problem either through reg with DOR or through a statutory change. But we did the best we could with this, with something that's brand new. We work with the Association of Counties on this. We work with DOR on this. We work with the resource agencies up there. This is the best thing we could come up with. And to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. And are there going to be questions, good questions, like Ms. Howard has raised or like Mr. Somerville has raised going forward? There's going to be. But I can tell you that what the intent of this statute is, and I can tell you there's a tremendous amount of goodwill up there exhibited toward any county that takes the bull by the horns and tries to solve its own problems, rather than going up to Columbia and trying to have appropriations.
Other questions? Okay, Chris, we'll start with you. No, we're going to start with
Just a quick
Chris.
question, Senator.
We're ignoring you, Chris. Go ahead, Stu.
Given what Paul mentioned, and something could be interpreted two different ways, from a legislative standpoint, is there any way to, let's not really codify it, but to get an opinion that essentially says, no, this is what we really intended here, that would maybe foreclose the municipalities suing us over that, which could get very messy?
Sure, and that was my intent in a short amount of time in getting that letter from the clerk of the Senate, was to speak to what the intent of the legislation was and what its meaning would be. If you would like, what I will do, if it gets second reading, in between now and when it would get third reading, which I guess would be sometime in August, I could get with Bob
August 8th.
Cook at the Attorney General's office, and Representative Erickson and I can endeavor to get a written opinion from the Attorney General to answer some of these questions that Ms. Howard is raising and Mr. Somerville is raising, to give you all additional comfort in that regard. And I'm happy to work on that, as I know Representative Erickson would be.
I tend to think that would be helpful going into the referendum.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to do that.
Chris?
Thank you. So if we were to purchase property in another county, would we then have to annex it?
No.
Okay.
No.
We just own property and...
Right, and I can tell you, just by way of information, Mr. Herbershon, Jasper County is considering a similar referendum to put on the ballot this November. I work with their attorney, David Tedder. He had some of the same questions that Mr. Keaveney had in regard to the mechanics of it, what's the role of the advisory committee, what's the role of the DOR, who has plenary authority and how to spend that money. But no, would not involve annexation, no, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Which brings up another question, but we'll get to that. Mr. Glover?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Davis, I do like omelets. I just want you to know that now. So, I like open space, green space. I like conservation, period. So I am not against what you are proposing here. As a matter of fact, I would be more supportive of it because I do like green space. So the thing that is puzzling me in my mind right now is that when I look at the rural and critical land program that we have in the county, that's very successful.
Yes, sir.
It purchased green space, just like you outlined in this legislation here. And whether you like the landowners or not, the money, the proceed actually goes directly to the landowner for either fee simple, conservation easements, or whatever. But the landowners are really the beneficiary of those funds. One of the problems, and we don't have to do it that way as a county. If this passes, we can approve the appropriation, however it comes before us. So I understand all of that. The thing that really bothers me a lot in this is that when you read some of the language in the resolution, the bill here, you talk about 92% of Bluffton is under PUD. Why would a town put all of their resource in PUDs? I mean, you would think that they would have left some of that land open just because of nature. And when I was at Clemson, I'll tell you that I used to get a lot of phone calls from Sun City because of feral hogs. And I told them, y'all put your house in their domain. And they have no other place to go but where they used to go. We've taken a lot away, and I wish something like this was here before. the horse actually got on the bond, but it's out of the bond right now, and we're trying to capture that, and the recipient of this funds may actually end up in the hands of developers who will then probably take that money and go other places to buy property for development. I wish we could put the money in the hands of the landowners first before any of this property is actually transpired. So that's my only
Yes, sir. If I could
concern
respond.
about
Respond to those very good comments, absolutely. And I would share what you have to say about the rural and critical lands. I mean, frankly, as this was being drafted and debated, and as I thought through what it might look like in Beaufort County, in my mind, it was always going to be rural and critical lands was going to be involved in this somehow because it has incurred such goodwill over time in the respect of this community, as evidenced by the percentage by which bond referendums have been approved in the past. I think they get in the mid-70s, which is almost unheard of. So I share what you have to say about that. I also agree with you that, and I'm not here to throw any stones at anybody, but I think we're in this box right now. And by the box, I mean that if everything that's already been approved, okay, is built, we're looking at a doubling of the rooftops in southern Beaufort County and an absolute ruining of our environment. And you talk about traffic problems on the roads, you double the amount of cars that are there. I don't care how many roads you widen, you're going to have traffic problems. You have to get to the source of the problem. And I wish we didn't have municipalities, and let's just call an ace and ace. A lot of times, landowners will come in and they'll say, we'll annex into your municipality if you give us higher densities. I mean, you see that same dynamic playing out not only in Beaufort County, you see it playing out in Jasper County. So I'll agree with you. And that's why I said what I did 2 weeks ago. In order for this to work, there's going to have to be some sort of memorandum of understanding with the counties, Jasper County and Beaufort County, and the municipalities that we're not going to keep increasing densities on the one hand and then buying up those densities with this green space money on the other hand. I mean, that's just self-defeating. And I understand that. You make an excellent point. And I wish we could go back 10 years and implement something like this and buy up some of these large tracts of land that are now being subdivided into thousands of lots. I wish we could. But we are where we are right now. We are where we find ourselves. And I guess what I was thinking to myself, Mr. Glover, was in the time that I'm in the Senate, I don't want to be remembered as the person that let Beaufort County become like Mount Pleasant on my watch while I was in there. That I was at least going to give County Council a tool, if it wanted to exercise it, to go ahead and control its destiny. To do so in a way, not by downzoning or not by inverse condemnation or by moratoriums, which are going to get you tied up in court, but like the rural and critical lands are doing. They go in there, they go into the marketplace, and they decide what they want to purchase. And in terms of money going to developers, I'll go back and say what I said to Ms. Howard. It's you guys, Beaufort County Council, that's ultimately going to decide how that money is spent. Okay, you're the ones that are going to make those hard decisions in regard to how to wisely spend that money. And just like the point I made to Ms. Howard, if leases aren't a way to go for the good reasons that she suggested, I suspect that's not going to be one of the things that Beaufort County Council approves. But I share your wistfulness that we could go back 10 years and implement it then instead of doing it now. But I still think there's time, okay? I mean, these are cancer cells, but they're not yet, active. They're sort of dormant. We can still go in there and do chemo, okay? But I think the clock is ticking, which is why I think it's important to do it this November. If we waited 2 more years, and this has to be held in a general election cycle, the way the act is worded, it has to be in a regular cycle. It couldn't be next year. It would have to be in 2024 if we don't know it now. I fear that if we wait 2 years, those PUDs and those development agreements and those tracts of land that right now are under tremendous pressure to be developed, they're going to be developed in a couple of years, and I think our opportunity will have been missed.
The other comment I make is that I commend you for taking I call the bull by the horn and bringing whatever you can do to bring the port to Jasper County, because a lot of Jasper County revenue was actually on landowners and agricultural land, so they could not gain a lot of revenue. But that port will help them a whole lot. Now, in the meantime, I guess, they're expanding with rooftops, which is compounding the situation in the low country. So if you continue to work on that port, hopefully get that in here as soon as possible. At least there can be some other source of revenue for the county.
And to your point, Mr. Glover, a lot of what we're experiencing in southern Beaufort County is driven by the tremendous amount of investment that's already occurred in southern Jasper County. I mean, you've got millions of square feet of warehouses and distribution centers and other infrastructure servicing the port in Savannah. And that's going to continue. You're going to continue to see companies locating in southern Jasper County, much as they have in the past decade located to Berkeley County and Dorchester County to benefit from the Port of Charleston. They're going to locate in southern Jasper County because of the benefits of the Port of Savannah, which in turn increases the pressure on where everybody wants to live, which is Beaufort County. I mean, so we're almost a victim of our own success. I mean, I love to see economic development in Jasper County. And yes, our delegation has worked hard for that because it's important. The corridor of shame is now the corridor of opportunity. But the collateral effect of that is tremendous pressure on Beaufort County to develop. And I think that just increases the urgency with which we have to treat this matter.
Okay, we're kind of running short on time now. So what I'd like to do, go ahead.
Briefly, if I could. First, thank you both for all taking the time to come today and setting this up. I'm probably not the most green person here on County Council, not the biggest on focusing on the environmental issues, but one of the things I will say that we've noticed on County Council over the past couple months and the last year and a half is there's been a lot of talk of when are we going to do affordable housing, when are we going to start focusing on that. Biggest thing I always says, when are we going to slow down the growth? When are we going to stop the growth? When are we going to move forward with the bridge? When are we going to move forward with the roads? And it seems like we have a lot of those conversations and nobody actually ever does anything. So that's one of the biggest reasons I support this. Yes, it might not be perfect. Yes, we might have questions, but at least we're actually doing something. We're putting boots on the ground and putting something in place and trying to put a dent into some of the things that have been put in place before us, prior people in our seats. And we're trying to make a stand to the people that voted us here to say, hey, we want to slow down the growth. And we all know we can't say, okay, we'll close the door now that you're here. But there are things we can do to make an effort. And this gives us that tool. It's the same thing with some of the things we're trying here in County Council with affordable housing now. We're looking at different opportunities, different ways to try it. I honestly think it's a great program. I hope we can move forward with it this year. It's something I support. Even if it is, negotiating, so like we talked about the 5 years, 10 years, full penny, half penny, those are a lot of questions we still have, but at least we're making an effort to do something instead of talking about it and kicking it down the road until the next election cycle where someone says, oh, we want a candidate that's going to stop the growth here in Beaufort County. And then someone up here is going to be like, oh yeah, we tried to do this. But let's at least put our money where our mouth is and do something about it. And that's where I stand on it. The transportation tax that, I even supported originally, I didn't want any new roads because I'm not trying to grow the area. I'm trying to maintain what we have and perfect what we have. And if that means buying up space so we can catch up on the road density, then so be it. Is it the best plan in the world? No, but at least it is a plan. Jared said once when we were talking about the bridge, he said a 10-year plan that never happens is worse than an 8-year plan that at least gets started. At some point we have to start. So.
To your point, Mr. Cunningham, when this bill was initially drafted by our delegation, and it was a delegation effort, it was for the low country because the low country has the most fragile ecosystem. It's the one that I care most about. But when I introduced the legislation, I had people in Greenville and the upstate and in the Midlands. They're also feeling the pinch. And so that's when it was expanded to not only apply to coastal counties, but to every county. And that's why you had Republicans and Democrats, upstate, low country, Midlands, across the board supporting this because everybody in South Carolina is feeling this pinch. People are voting their pocketbooks and coming to South Carolina. And in fact, I was talking to one of my colleagues the other day. They said, well, we got your green space bill, the delegation's green space bill passed. Are you guys going to do something with it? They're watching us. Greenville's watching us. Charleston County's watching us. They're wanting to see somebody go ahead and, as you say, Mr. Cunningham, do something proactively. We're giving you all the tools. Hopefully you guys will use them.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to miss an opportunity to comment on this, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you both to Senator Davis and Representative Erickson for coming tonight. I think Senator Davis is correct. The clock is certainly ticking. I see this as an extraordinary opportunity to do something positive to ensure that there's no further deterioration of our environment and to impose limits on density and growth and other factors placing strain on our natural resources. I fully support this endeavor and our collaborative effort to implement this proposal. Thank you very much.
One last thing to say.
Yes, and then I'd like to summarize so we can get to the
Yes.
agenda, make sure that we...
Thank you so much for being here, and as both of you know, I have always been very supportive of conservation. I took these two things, we can't talk about this one without talking about the transportation and Greenbelt tax referendum, and I spent a lot of time comparing them. I support the transportation and Greenbelt tax referendum. It's patterned after the one in Charleston, which has been very successful with the Greenbelt program up there. It has things in it for resiliency, which you've mentioned. I think there's too many questions about this one and how to implement it, and for that reason, I am supportive of our transportation referendum and the Greenbelt part of it, with the thought that we put the maximum amount of money into the Greenbelt tax referendum portion of that. And I think it's more specific. I think implementation is going to be a problem. I worry about these opinions from the state and DOR. Omelets are great, but I had to learn how to make them from somebody else, and you know, I'm still not great at it, to use that analogy, but I think we don't necessarily in Beaufort County have to be the first to pass this. We have a lot of other tools already, including the Rural and Critical Lands Program.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said, I'm not going to make a decision for you. I'm going to offer information. I will tell you that from the Transportation Committee in the House and carried through the Transportation Committee in the Senate, the budget for Beaufort counties, the funds coming from the state are increasing. We put $1 billion into roads. You talk about doing something, Mr. Cunningham, I promise you, that was my line in the sand this year. So $1 billion went into roads. We'll see I-95 up to exit 33, hopefully 38, get widened and resurfaced here. They're doing the engineering as we speak. We're almost doubling our county transportation funds for every county in the state. We hope that these will help people see that their tax dollars are being used wisely and going for what we promised them they would go to. So this is a difficult task, I know. You've got two opportunities here, and you're just going to have to figure out which one is the best that fits you all. I will tell you that Senator Davis has put in an inordinate amount of work into open land. The delegation, yes, supported the bill wholeheartedly, and it's written with a lot of flexibility for the counties to utilize, not to cause you heartburn. So when we go get those opinions, I'm going to feel comfortable that you're going to get opinions that back up the ability for the county to be making the decisions. At least that's all the debate that there was in the House side, and I watched most of what was on the Senate side as well. So you've got to decide. You're elected by the people, the government closest to them making this decision. You've got two great opportunities. And quite frankly, I'm glad that you're going to make the decision and not me. And I bless you for that, because, you know, we'll go back and make the other decisions that you might not want to make. But I thank you all for your time, especially listening to Senator Davis's answers. He's been working really hard on this for the entire county, and our delegation is very supportive of this, both of them.
If I could issue a couple more comments, Ms. Howard. As to your concerns about the statute, if we were to get second reading, again, I would commit to getting an opinion from the Attorney General before third reading to try to address some of those concerns. That's the first point I would make. The second point I would make respectfully is that going to the people of Beaufort County and asking them for local option sales tax money from them to pay for state projects at a time when we have the sort of money that's in the coffers up there in Columbia that people are actively petitioning for, I don't know that the sale could be made in that regard. I mean, if we weren't in a situation where there were $6 billion in federal money being drawn down over 5 years, if it weren't for the fact that we've appropriated $200 million in new recurring money to DOT on top of the gas tax, if it weren't for the fact that we set aside $1 billion in a contingency reserve fund, if it weren't for the fact that you've got literally billions of dollars up there in road money that we can actively and persuasively petition for, I would be more sympathetic to the penny sales tax for the roads. With all due respect, I think due diligence requires going after that state money first to figuring out what it is you actually do need to collect from the locals. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, I want to thank both of you. I am comfortable with many of the things you have said because the questions that were posed to you, you did have answers for us. It is my opinion that County Council should move forward with the second reading because you've assured us the questions that we have, we're going to get additional answers to. I am comfortable with the fact that you said something that's near and dear to my heart. We like to have preservation of land. We are the forerunner of that. We have a process in place that says we can continue on with that process. The committee that you are setting up is advisory, ministerial, to ensure that what this group does over here comes to them and they just say, yes, in fact, it is preservation. Go ahead. My only concern, a question I have is, okay, it eventually gets to DOR. And DOR has the authority to say, we don't think that that is land preservation. What happens then?
Well, first of all, and I'll have to go back and look at it, but I believe that the opinion I got from the general counsel for DOR speaks to that and says that they're going to look at a 40,000-foot view. They're not going to get into the weeds. They're not going to make second guessing in regard. They're simply going to say, is this going for preservation or is it going for something that's completely foreign to this statute? But to the extent that we need to be more specific in that regard, and I think that they are specific, I'll get that for you as well. I understand Ms. Howard raises great questions, so does Mr. Somerville. I feel confident that we can get you all answers by the time there's third reading.
Great. And on the transportation referendum, you hit the nail on the head. I was the one that came to you and said, we have a lot of money in there that the taxpayers of Beaufort County should not be paying for when somebody else, namely the federal government through the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, may be able to help us, the additional money that the state is getting. And so I commend you for moving forward with that. That means that we do have to take a look at our transportation referendum. They did a wonderful job of laying out, this is exactly what we need. Now we have to parse that out and say, we don't need this in the referendum. This could be done elsewhere. We can take that and change the referendum. So thank you very much for coming and cleaning up some things. Okay, we only have a couple minutes. I'd like to take a look at the agenda to see if any of you have questions on the agenda. We only have one consent agenda item that I believe is unanimous in nature. When we come to one specific item on the agenda, which is item number 17, if you read that, it's talking about property regarding the Melrose Landing. I am going to ask for a member of council to make a motion to postpone that because we have received tremendous amount of input today regarding that, which will lead us to having further discussions. So I do not want to convolute the conversations that we need to have. So I will ask a member of council to take care of that when we do that. Any other questions before we adjourn the caucus meeting? Yes, sir.
It strikes me, Mr. Chairman, that 15 and 16, which are the two referendums, are related, and perhaps we need to talk about those somewhat at the same time.
We will.
Yeah.
We will. Absolutely. That will have some discussion. Then if there are no other questions, the caucus meeting will be adjourned, and we will come back in about 5 minutes for us to change over. Welcome to the County Council meeting of Monday, July 11th. It was supposed to start at 6 o'clock, but it is now 6:13. I would like to call this meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll? We are a hybrid group this evening, which means we have several of council people here in County Council, but we do have several online. So as your name is called, would you please acknowledge that you are present for the meeting?
Chairman Passavant,
Yes, I'm here.
Vice Chairman Somerville,
Present online.
Councilmember Glover,
Here.
Councilmember Hervashon,
Present.
Councilmember Rodman,
Present.
Councilmember Howard,
Here.
Councilmember Lawson,
Mark Lawson, present and in person.
Councilmember McEllen,
Present online?
Councilmember Dawson,
Present and online?
Councilmember Flewelling,
Present online.
and Councilmember Cunningham.
Present and in chambers.
Okay, we do have all 11 members in council and online to conduct the business. Would you all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation, so please remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity for us to be able to meet here today, Lord. This is something that we don't take for granted, and I hope that it never comes to that point, Lord. We just thank you for the opportunity to represent Beaufort County, and we pray that the decisions that we make up here, whether we agree or disagree, are always done in the best interest of the county and the people. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Public notice of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. I would ask a member of County Council to amend the agenda tonight to move item 8 and 7. We're going to flip those. So 8 will become 7 and 7 will become 8. So may I have that motion?
So moved as suggested,
Mr. Rodman
Chairman.
has made the motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Lawson has made the second. Is there any objection to moving the agenda items 7 and 8 around? Seeing none, that is approved without objection. Therefore, I will ask a member of council now to approve the amended agenda. Mr. Rodman makes the motion. Mr. Lawson makes the second, duly motioned and seconded. I see no objections for the amended agenda.
You want to do that
Number 17, is that going to be?
Yeah, do you want me to do that as part of this? Okay, all right. I would ask for a second amendment before we approve the amended agenda to postpone item number 17 to the next council meeting, which will be August 8th.
Councilman Lawson has a motion.
I'll make that motion. We postpone, what number is that, 17?
Item number 17.
Until August 8th, our next council meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Ms. Howard. Is there any discussion?
Well, it still seems to me there's items that we need to discuss. If we pass this, is that the end of the discussion? Or are we still going to discuss it?
No, we will have the second reading next time, and hopefully some of the questions that have arisen, we will already have those questions answered.
Okay, so I think what you're saying is, if I want to speak, now's the time to speak.
Yeah?
Okay. A couple of comments relative to this as I've thought about it. We have two landings that we were interested in acquiring.
Well, wait a second. You're going to actually speak on the topic. The motion is whether we want to postpone it or not.
Right.
So,
do I get to speak sometime during the meeting on it?
yes.
Okay, then I'll wait until that time
Not if
comes.
it's postponed, though.
Well, yeah,
We still have to, we're going to change the wording on, to postpone, but we can still discuss it.
no.
And then
No. No, so the actual motion is to postpone. You're objecting to postponing it.
No, I'm not objecting to it, I just want to speak to it. You get to speak to a motion, it's just a matter of when I do it.
Well, you see, Stu, it won't be a motion for
Yeah.
today's agenda. If you remove it today, why speak about something that we're not going to vote on?
Right.
Seems counterproductive to me.
No, because it's something I do want to speak to. So
At the citizen's comment, you can certainly,
no, we have a motion on the floor.
right,
So I should be
to
able to-
postpone an item.
Okay, so we're,
And that's what we're doing. You want to speak about the item, not postponing it.
well, I want to speak to the fact, to related facts, something that I think needs to happen in parallel. I can be brief.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have the discretion. You're correct. Councilman Robin wants to discuss something that's not relevant to the motion specifically, but you have the discretion to allow it.
Can you be brief?
I can be brief.
Okay.
Okay.
We know and love you. But brevity is not necessarily in your vocabulary at times.
We have two landings that we want to acquire.
Yeah.
The staff studied alternatives, and there were four relative to Hilton Head, and the Hilton Head one makes a lot of sense because it includes not only a landing but parking, and parking is the key to the ferry, and the ferry is the key to the Fusky. Relative to on the Fusky, there were four that were looked at. The staff recommended one, which is the one that we're looking at. And there may be a little bit of misunderstanding here. My sense was that council was asked whether we wanted to have the staff negotiate on the landing, and we were told then that there was no negotiation, that the party was not willing to negotiate, so we came back and we said, we'll condemn it. Now, I do think it makes sense to postpone it. However, it does seem to me that from what I learned, the people that are buying Melrose have a pending closing in a short period of time in early August. And that this particular issue may hamper or may mess up that particular deal. So to just postpone it may actually compromise what would be a good purchase for the county. Now, it seems to me, from what I see, is that for what we want and what the people that want to acquire Melrose want are probably relatively similar, and it probably doesn't make too much difference what the mechanism is. And so my thought is that in this intervening period, the staff should meet with the Melrose folks and see if they can come up with a memo of understanding that would be satisfactory to both groups. But I am concerned if all we do is postpone it to August and then there's a closing that was pending, doesn't happen. So that's my thought of what we should do.
But that doesn't mean we're not going to do what you said. Mr. Cunningham.
I will object to postponement, just want to go on record for that, but the reason for that is it is hindering the possible purchase of this property. I know that they put in an extra 60 days of closing before we even move forward, and that sort of did open up the opportunity for us to explore it, but at the same time, this is a big opportunity for Beaufort County for this property to close or not close. This would only move forward to, I believe, the second reading. So this is the second reading going into the third reading, so it would still give us another opportunity to postpone it on third reading. I've said the same statement before on other things that we've discussed. We decided to vote on it today, have the open dialogue, and the biggest thing is, too, it seems like we have quite a few people here that came out to hear the discussion on Melrose Place. I do think that that time and effort they put in deserves our at least dialogue openly in front of all of them for taking that effort as well. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Hervachon.
Yeah, real quick, can we provide additional context to the public as far as why we want to postpone this?
Yes, and Mr. Greenway will have some comments when he does his presentation, his administrator presentation. But trust me, the bottom line is both groups want to do the same thing. It's how we approach it.
Fair enough.
And that's why we're seeking a postponement at this time because we may be able to approach it differently
Thank you.
without, divulging anything.
Got it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, and you were the second, Mr. Rodman. You still want to be the second to postpone?
A second for discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and second. We have, I believe, discussed this. So we're now going to take a vote. Will the clerk please conduct the vote? Mr. Lawson will be first because he made the motion. Mr. Rodman will be second, and then however you want to call the remainder of the roll, I go last.
Councilmember Lawson.
Mark Lawson, yes.
Councilmember Rodman.
No?
Vice Chairman Somerville.
Yes.
Councilmember Glover.
Yes.
Councilmember Hervishon.
Yes.
Councilmember Lawson. Oh, I'm sorry. I already called you. Councilmember Howard. I apologize.
Yes.
Councilmember McEllen.
Yes. Yes.
Councilmember Dawson.
Yes.
Councilmember Flewelling.
Yes.
Councilmember Cunningham.
No.
And the chairman.
Yes. By my count, it's 9 yes, 2 no.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the agenda has been amended to remove item number 17. So now we need a motion and second for the changes that have been made into the agenda, flipping 7 and 8 and removing 17. A motion, please.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKellen makes the motion. Second. Mr. Rodman makes the second. Duly motioned and second for the amended agenda. Are there any objections?
I'll object.
Okay, one objection. The motion is carried, 10 yes, 1 no. Okay, approval of the minutes of April 11th, 18th, and 21st of 2022. May I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKellen makes the motion. A second, please.
Second.
Mr. Glover makes the second. Duly motioned and seconded. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, the minutes are approved. We are at our administrator's report. Mr. Greenway. Good evening, sir.
Mr. Chairman, good evening to you and councils and everyone who's in attendance here in chambers and online. The first thing I want to highlight for you tonight is the Fusky Island Ferry. I will be going over to Fusky Island tomorrow for a meeting at 3:30 with the Fusky Island Council. I will give an update to everyone there tomorrow on our plans to proceed with the purchase of the Melrose Landing. While we made the decision that we made, what we're planning to do with the property, that does not preclude us from exploring other options or other opportunities as well. But we have thoroughly done this over the last year and a half, and we do not have many options for you all at this point. This is the most efficient option for providing ferry service to the island. We not only have to take into account ferry service, but we have to take into account EMS operations over there and getting people in a medical emergency off that island. So we feel like this is a good situation, but we will continue to explore the options and have discussions with Melrose Landing as long as those discussions happen in good faith with a desire to cooperate on both sides of the equation. I just want to make that clear on the record this evening that I expect a cooperative, productive discussion moving forward on anything that we do over there. We are under a time crunch to provide a plan for providing ferry service to the Fusky Island. Your only other option, as I see it, and I don't think it's a very good option, it's not one that I would recommend to you, is to get out of the ferry business to the Fusky Island and let private enterprise take that over. And I think that would be problematic for a number of reasons. So we will have more information for the residents and the folks tomorrow at the meeting at 3:30 with the Fusky Island Council Working Committee on Short-Term Rentals And that's all I can share at this particular point. The Tcl Property Committee that we've established for the use of the properties that we purchased, or we're in the process of purchasing from Tcl, that committee meets for the first time tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock. The purpose of that committee is, and it's made up of people that live in that community where these properties are located, would be to help us craft a recommendation to come back to council at a later date on what is the best thing to do with the property on any redevelopment or resale of those parcels in the future. And is Kurt online? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Kurt, do you have an update for council on where we are with the final disposition of the retiree health insurance litigations, health insurance issue?
That is in the hands of the Finance Committee.
Okay, so they're in the process of distributing the funds for the final time?
No, sir. There's been no decision made.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Is it in the hands of Finance or the Finance Committee?
Finance Committee.
Gotcha.
Even I can talk.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And as I customarily do, I introduce employees, and tonight I'm going to ask Kyle Jackson to come up. Many of you are probably familiar with Kyle. He plays an important role here for us. He is the Director of Risk Management and Safety. He's been with us 5.5 years. He is responsible, of course, for the county's risk and safety program that includes being in charge of the county's property and casualty insurance, our self-insured workers' comp program, overseeing all property and casualty claims, including workers' comp accident investigations, risk assessments and loss control, and risk training and support to departments. Kyle doesn't do the training, but I've had the pleasure numerous times to sit in on our driver safety training, and it's rather entertaining as you know, as much as you can make driver safety training entertaining. So he does a good job finding the right people to bring in with those training programs. And I'm told here, and I'm not sure that he lives in Margaritaville, but I'm told that Kyle is a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. So, do you live in Margaritaville?
I'm going to at some point.
Are you? when you get to the right age?
That's right.
All right, okay, that's good. Well, the mayor of Hardyville would be proud to hear that. So, anyway, I'm going to let you say a few words if you want to, then I'm going to get a picture with you, and then we're going to give you a round of applause, all right?
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. And I mean, I'm humble, you know. There's a lot of great people to work with in this county, from the top to the bottom. I work with all the departments on all kinds of different issues, and everybody's willing to work with me, and it's a really good place to work. So I really appreciate it.
Turn right around here. Miss Liz is going to get a picture for us. And, all right, let's give him a round of applause. You all also know this next person that's coming up here. This is Neil Desai. He's our Director of Public Works. He's been with us 2.5 years, came from us from City of Beaufort, from the city, from Charleston County. Right, so anyway, you're going to meet another one of his former bosses here right after I finish up with him. Neil was very verbose in his description of his job duties, and it simply says oversee daily operations for 10 divisions within the department. That's all I got to work with. So he does a lot. He does more than he would probably tell you. Solid waste, road maintenance, fleet management, stormwater stuff, disaster recovery, all of those things. Neil's very organized. He always comes to my meetings with his own agenda of things that he needs to talk to me about. and go over with me. So he's a star employee, and I think the world of him. And something unique about Neil, as you all might guess, as most civil engineers do, as a small child, Neil grew up with Legos and building sets, which eventually inspired him to be a civil engineer. So, let's get a picture here. All right. Neil's going to stay here, and Mr. Chairman, if you want to introduce the next item on the agenda, that concludes my report.
Yes, the next item on the list is a presentation by Mr. Jim Neal of the American Public Works Association Accreditation.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, my name is Jim Neal. I'm the Director of Engineering and Technology for the American Public Works Association. I'm here representing Mr. Stan Brown, who's our president, to present the accreditation plaque to Beaufort County Public Works, and it gives me great pleasure to work with, to be able to provide this accreditation recognition. What this means is that your Public Works Department, your director and their staff know what they're doing. They're skilled professionals in public works, and they're recognized by their peers. The accreditation is a mark of professionalism. It indicates that that agency is committed to improvement and to providing outstanding service to their citizens. Accreditation recognizes that the policies that they have are in compliance with existing rules and in the practice of public works. They've been evaluated by experienced public works professionals, public works directors from other agencies around the United States. And they've been compared to other agencies, and there's about 83,000 public works agencies in the United States. And today, or as of the 1st of June, 175 of them have been accredited. So it's very, very competitive. It shows the dedication, and I want to just recognize a couple people. One, Mr. Administrator, your support of the Public Works Department. Jared, your support. Certainly, Neil Desai has done yeoman work, and he told me that if it wasn't for Pamela, he wouldn't have got it done. Because somebody has to be out there prodding all your employees, write your policy, write down what you do every day. We're not saying you don't do it right, but you got to write it down. And that's really important, that you write down what you do, because the next person that comes in for the job after you leave or retire needs to know what they're doing. This agency and the county are, this accreditation shows that you've got a productive, efficient organization that has a succession plan, does its asset management properly, and strives for continuous improvement. And I think that's really important. So during the May site visit, when they had 3 public works folks come down to evaluate, they looked at 194 different things that your public works department does. And on June 1st, 2022, the APWA Accreditation Council awarded full accreditation status to Beaufort County Public Works Department. On behalf of the American Public Works Association, it's my pleasure to award the accreditation plaque in recognition of the hard work and dedication of these public works professionals. So if I could get Mr. Chairman, Mr. Administrator, Assistant Administrator, and Public Works Director, and Pamela all come up. We'll get a picture of receiving the plaque. Which is a pretty good number.
Put that right here so everybody can see it during the meeting. Thank you. Now it gives me great pleasure for a proclamation recognizing the Gulagici Nation Appreciation Week. Mr. Glover, would you please read that proclamation?
Thank you. If Queen Quet would come forward. I do have a proclamation here from council, so I'm going to give this to you now. I'm going to read what's on there. Thank you. The proclamation reads, whereas African began arriving on the Sea Islands in the 1500s, and whereas the population of all of these Africans increased as cattle enslavement grew in the 1600s, and whereas these Africans began to engage with, and in some instances, created families with indigenous Americans in the region, and whereas the descendants of this group are called Gulagici, and whereas this group of self-sufficient people came together in 1999 throughout the Sea Islands and Low Country of the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida to stand on their human rights to self-determination, and whereas this group took 1 year to elect their own leader, and whereas they elect and install St. Helena Island native whose family roots also stem from Palawana and Dartor Islands, Queen Quet, chiefess of the Gulagici Nation, and whereas Queen Quet has served as the official head Pundibadi and spokesperson for Gulagici since July 2nd, 2000, and whereas the 22nd anniversary of the Gulagici Nation is being celebrated under the theme, This Year Who We Be, celebrating the Gulagici living legacy, and whereas we support the continuation of the Gulagici culture, heritage, and sustainability of the Gulagici Nation, and now therefore be it resolved that the Beaufort County Council does hereby proclaim the week of July 30th, 2022 to August the 6th, 2022 as Gulagici Nation Appreciation Week, and call upon all our citizens to celebrate with the citizens of the Gulagici Nation under the theme, This Year Who We Be, celebrating the Gulagici legacy, living legacy. The Gulagici Nation Appreciation Week, dated this day, 11th of July, and signed by our chairman, Joseph Passman, Jr. Okay.
Photo first?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please. And Mr. Chairman, I have to say that I'm doing this in the absence of Paul Somerville, who's here, but he's not here in person, so he asked me to step in for him.
And look, your Paul's feet better go than honey. Okay then. Good evening. Thank you one more again, Beaufort County Council, and for all the 100 children with they in Beaufort County. They left off the St. Helena part that I'm native of too, I think, but to say the roots from all three of them island and things like that. So I'm glad for they one more again on behalf of my ancestors. And for all the 100 children who to come here in the been here and things like that, they don't have to worry. I can crack my teeth out the rest of the way. I can speak your language as well, all of y'all who new to the town, so in the county. So I want to first say, thank you all for this again. And this year is the first time that we are beginning and ending Gulagici Nation Appreciation Week in this county. We are actually launching at the St. Helena Park, as we from the island say, West Felix. We will be launching there on July 30th at noon with Gulagici Family Day. It's open to everyone. You can come out, enjoy yourselves. And we will conclude at the Bluffton Oyster Factory Park on August the 6th. Both events will begin at noon. And so we want folks to come out, enjoy themselves, and especially Yeti Mova, who we be and things like that. And now for some good food and things like that, and Red Horse, Yeti the music and all that Cleveland kind of thing. So we will have a whole bunch of Gulagici things for you to do right here in our county this year. And it's a blessing to have this opportunity to have so many people in the county want to be a part of it. And I think that is also divinely ordered. That one of the things I wanted to mention tonight, and I'm glad it's in this proclamation this year, about my roots stemming from Palawana and Dato. There is a family burial area that I'm on the internet that went viral. There was over 500,000 people that saw it around the world about the desecration of one of my family burial areas. That is not the first one of my family burial areas, unfortunately, in this county to have that issue. I had to also fight for 3 years in court against someone who did that on St. Helena Island. Now we're seeing people on Hilton Head having to deal with this. This is an ongoing issue that I really feel that this county really needs to take a serious look at, because there are laws. It's a felony to do it, but no one's going to jail, and that's why they keep doing it. And so I definitely call on you to make sure that as we do resilience work, historic preservation work, conservation work, that you do not forget those who are the ancestors that we celebrate every year in this county through this week. I do it every week, but this county celebrates with us who are Gulagicis every year. So please put that on the top of your agenda. Give Eric Greenway's office even more work than I give him to do. We need to make sure that we put conservation easements around these critical areas, and we have an open and critical lands board here for these types of things. We need to consider that, not just scenic byways, because someone thinks that our families being buried there is a byway. It's not. It is heartfelt to us to have someone go in there, disturb it, and then nothing really get done. So we need to do this and adhere to what the laws are, not only in this county, but the state. And so it also is an honor to know that I walk in here tonight, just ahead of the presentation that's coming, to again honor ancestors. I am someone who fought for the Reconstruction Era National Monument, which is now our National Historic Park, and I wholeheartedly support the effort that you're going to hear about tonight to create a park around yet another one of our historic trees here in Beaufort County. We have the Emancipation Oak that's already a part of this National Historic Park. So there's so much of legacy and history in this county. It is mind-blowing. But for people to come here and be able to have a place to sit and reflect on all that they learned by going to the various places that are part of the Reconstruction Era National Park and its affiliated sites that are getting incorporated. This is a critical thing. So I'm happy and I'm pleased that God had it, that tonight is the night that all these folks filled up this place. I thought they came for me. I was a little upset a little bit. It turns out I felt some kind of way. But was happy that they thought I was here to be with them, and I am. But no one told me in advance this was happening. So I just wanted to add that while I have the mic, to just say that I hope this county does back this park, because it's important, and it's important for people to come here like they always do to beautiful Beaufort by the sea and yet more about who we be. Tanky, in honor of my ancestors who be Gulagici.
Okay, item number 9 on our agenda is a presentation of a pocket park project by Mr. Roland Gardner and Larry Rowland. Well, you don't look like either one.
I have to apologize that I'm not Roland Gardner. This is sort of a bait and switch. I mean, Roland Gardner is the vice chair of the Pat Conroy Literary Center, and I am one of the founders. Roland has asked me to take his place and to talk to you about what we feel passionately about, and that's a tree that is across the street from the Pat Conroy Center, and that's an ancient live oak tree that has real historical significance. Before I go into it and turn the floor over to historian Larry Rowland, I'm just going to tell you that as a founder of the Pat Conroy Center, and someone who cares deeply about Beaufort County, I've been coming here for nearly 40 years. In fact, I worked with Pat Conroy on various aspects of his writing career from the time he actually wrote the Great Santini on. During the last 15 years of Pat's life, I was his literary agent. And so I was deeply involved with Pat Conroy as the storyteller. And as you all know, he was exceptionally eloquent in speaking about this region and about the Low Country and the people of Beaufort County. When Pat died, it seemed impossible for us to imagine what this would be like without him. He was sort of the Shakespeare of the Low Country to many people around the world. We began to think of the best way to honor him, and that was through an interactive educational museum and a literary center. I had served on the National Endowment for the Humanities Board and evaluated literary centers over the years and was incredibly impressed with how much difference a community can be served with a really good literary center that celebrates the writing, reading, and the literary arts. When we decided to open up on Charles Street, it was 2017 in January that the National Library Association decided to make the Pat Conroy Literary Center a national literary landmark. That was an exceptionally quick turnaround. They knew that we existed, and the National Library Association made us a landmark. We actually have the plaque to prove it. The same year, we hired Jonathan Haupt as our tireless executive director, and also the same year, an organization called the National Writers Museums had Pat Conroy Literary Center join the homes of Mark Twain and William Faulkner and many other great American writers as another literary landmark. When I want to thank the council because this year we received an infrastructure grant for our new building, and it was an incredibly important gift to us to be able to do the repair that we needed to have this literary center active. What was one of the things that has made a big difference for us, because we have begun doing the storytelling that we do with Beaufort school children has been one of the biggest and most successful parts of our program. Why we're talking to you about a tree is that this is more than a tree. This tree comes with an incredible story, and it's a part of the fabric of this country's story. It's something that needs to be acknowledged. We are suggesting that this ancient live oak tree that sits near Bladen and King Street become a part of a passive pocket park. We have already gained support of at least a dozen organizations, both, I can read you the list, but it's besides the Pat Conroy Literary Center, the Beaufort County Historical Society. We appeared before the City of Beaufort Trees and Parks Commission and had unanimous support. Reverend Kenneth Hodges, who will speak, former state legislator and pastor of Tabernacle Church, is a supporter. Dr. Elijah Washington, the Grand Army Hall of the Republic. The Beaufort Council of Garden Clubs, the Master Gardeners of Beaufort, the Beaufort Planning Group's landscape architect Brad Hill, Bartlett Tree Experts has already stepped up and said that they will adopt this tree and make sure that it's healthy. The Historic Beaufort Foundation and the Beaufort History Museum. I would like the people in this room who came to hear about this tree to please stand up, because I would like to know who's here tonight. Thank you. One of the things that I've learned about storytelling, and Pat was the master literary storyteller, is that stories create, that shared stories create bonding for families, for communities, for nations. And by sharing this story of the Connecticut Volunteer Infantry, and you'll hear Larry talk about this, that this great storytelling machine, the Pat Conroy Center, will serve this community by telling the story of the tree. Our docents will be telling the visitors the stories. If we have the pocket park with benches. People will sit there, they'll relax, they'll get a chance to understand the important place that Beaufort plays in the nation's history. Last year alone, during the pandemic, we had over 3,000 people visit us from different cities, different countries. 40% of them spent at least one night in a Beaufort hotel or bed and breakfast. This was a year in which we were closed for renovation. This was a difficult year, but we are growing fast. The Pat Conroy Literary Center has a national reputation, an international one is on the horizon, and we want to be able to share the stories that made Pat Conroy love this town. And I think that these stories will rise to the surface, and every time one of them comes up, as this tree has presented itself in our front yard, we'll speak up for that story, and that story will be told. And I appreciate you very much having you listen to someone talk about a tree, because there's so many beautiful trees in Beaufort. If you listen to everyone talk about a beautiful tree, you would never get any other business done. So I'm going to turn it over to historian Larry Rowland.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your time and your patience, and members of the council. Do we have the picture that we had of the thumb drive? So where are we here? So this picture was taken during the Civil War. This is one of the earliest companies. This is the 29th Connecticut. It's often described as the first South Carolina, but it's not the first South Carolina. I wish it were. But
Can you get that blown up, Larry? Is it, Sarah, can you get that blown up so it takes up more of the screen?
Okay.
Yeah, that's not really.
That's the tree that's still there. That was the parade ground. And that whole area of Bladen Street where that tree is located, and the county now owns the parking lot, was a bivouac area for Union troops during the occupation. A lot of them, among the first United States colored troops to be recruited into the U.S. Army. In fact, it was on these sea islands that the former slaves were among the first of the former slaves to be recruited into the Union Army to fight for their own freedom. And this is one of the units. This happens to be the 29th Connecticut, but all those African-American units that bivouacked in that area had a parade ground under that tree. The American Battleground Trust calls these witness trees. In other words, the oldest living things that witnessed history. And the American Battleground Trust has preserved trees like this at Gettysburg and Antietam and many places in America where the tree is the last living thing to witness the piece of history. Beaufort, this is a very important part of Beaufort's history, and that tree is the witness tree for that history. What we would like to do is just preserve the drip line of that tree, no more, and preserve the tree for, just tell the story of future generations. The Beaufort County Historical Society, of which I am currently the president, puts up the official state historical markers, the archives markers. We have approved one for that tree to tell the story that I'm telling you now. So we would like for the county to help us preserve that tree. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to our citizens' comments. The first person on the list that I would like to bring forward is our solicitor, Mr. Duffy Stone. Mr. Stone, good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, I'll try to keep this to 3 minutes. Do you have the graph? Thank you for hearing from me. I want to first introduce you, if I may, sir. In the back of the room, Sean Thornton is my deputy solicitor. Beside him is Mary Jordan Limpesis. Beside her is Makia Jonice, Jared Shedd, and Sammy Molina. I wanted to introduce you to these people today because they are the people that have been working for the last 2.5 years on the DUI project, on the pilot program. In 2018, I got an email from Councilman then Rick Caparell. telling me that over 2/3 of the cases in magistrate's court that were DUIs were being dismissed. And they were being dismissed because the county deputies were trying these cases by themselves. And council, and at that time I worked with them and we developed a pilot program with this process and these 3 goals. Number 1, see if you can do something about the horribly large dismissal rate. Number 2, see if you can increase the conviction rate. But number 3, above all else, make sure that no Beaufort County deputy has to go to court, whether that be in a roster meeting, a jury trial, a motion hearing, because they were getting killed, in the words of Rick Caparel, by experienced defense attorneys. And over the last 2.5 years, that's exactly what they did. This graph above you shows the results of that pilot program. I sent you that March the 30th of this year. As you can tell, what was in 2017 an overwhelming number of dismissals turned into an overwhelming number of convictions. And it was done by those people back there and about a half a dozen other ones. And I brought them here tonight because I wanted to thank them. I wanted to thank them publicly, and I wanted to show them the respect that I think they deserve. Because quite frankly, I saw the work they put in. I saw them come in early and I saw them stay late. I saw them on Saturdays and Sundays, and not once did they complain. That's not true. Makia Jones actually did complain. She was very upset because she had spent weeks bringing in expert witnesses, lining up a case that the defendant came in and pled guilty at the last minute, and she didn't get to try the case. That's the only complaint I ever heard from these people. They are dedicated public servants, and they deserve our thanks and our respect. But they didn't get that from county council. They had a county council member who said this program that is showing over your head right now was a failure. And it was a failure because there were some cases still pending. There was a backlog. Never mind the 1 year that the court was shut down because of COVID. Never mind the fact that the solicitors don't run the docket in magistrate's court. Judges do. And that councilman knew that because he used to be the chief magistrate. In fact, he was the chief magistrate over the year of 2017 when 2 out of 3 defendants charged with DUIs walked out the back door. I'm here tonight to say thank you to these people. I'm not here to argue the points. I'm not here to ask you for anything. I'm standing here thanking them because they should be thanked. And it's not just from me. I got an email last week that I'd like to read to you, Mr. Chairman, very briefly. It says, "Let me congratulate you for the exciting results of your pilot program. Your summary report points out the clear benefits of this approach in terms of improving conviction rates. Thank you and your team." And I emphasize your team because I didn't do this, they did. For being willing to innovate and push for stronger DUI prosecutions. That came from Stephen Barrett, South Carolina Executive Director, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. He thanked them, and you should have.
Okay, we have some people who want to speak about issues that haven't identified what they want to speak about. First one is Bill. Are you here?
Yes.
Please come forward. You have 3 minutes to address County Council.
Thank you. I'll be prompt. Council members, Mr. Chairman, I'm here to speak about the Fusky tonight. I know it's been moved, but I came 6 hours, so I'd like, since you're going to have a little bit of time in between, all I want to do is season you with some thoughts coming from the homeowners. So my name is Bill Werkheiser. I'm the president of the Melrose Cottage Owners Association, which is 42 homes, and I was asked by our homeowners and our board to come in and talk to you guys tonight. So if you want to, I always know, I never come around often, but when I do, it's because there's been an impact that is literally as close as you can see those buildings over there. We pass this around to you guys. This is the Bankrupt Resort that they've been living around since 2009. So we're impacted more than anybody. We're actually in the resort. And so that's what I'm here to talk to you about. So I'm asking on behalf of the 42 property owners in the MCOA that you not proceed with the condemnation process. You've delayed it. I plead with you to please try to work something out. Because any solution that that goes through with this will impact all of us. So you're going to say, okay, well, why? Why are these guys impacted? If this were done in a public forum, you would have seen hundreds of people. And I'm not kidding. You've got 40 here. The Melrose Association's fully behind it. I've talked to their president, their vice president, and we've been working together actually with the developer since he came into the picture. He's been present. We've been talking. We're planning. We're working together. It's been very positive. Do I have some concerns? He's a developer, right? So, I mean, of course I have some concerns, but he's done everything that he said so far. So let me continue. So we didn't have a chance to talk, but I think, Pandora's box is kind of open now. I think a lot of people are going to want to talk about this. So the resort's been effectively closed since 2009. The community suffered greatly. Property values have been hard hit. Things were difficult. Everybody passes an abandoned resort and abandoned cottages next to even my homes. They've been abandoned since 2009. Empty, windows busted out. They've gotten them boarded up. They've started to make some improvements. So some positive things happening. People that wanted to sell their homes, they're on the market so long that they had to discount them 60% to sell them. This is real. They paid $1.3 million. They got $600,000, and they waited a year and a half to sell their homes. Ugly situation. Since the news broke, my time's out?
No, you have 30 seconds.
Okay, since the news broke of the potential buyer, the arrival of the team there, just that speculation period, the property values have gone up 60%, and that there's not a home for sale, there's not a lot for sale, there's nothing for sale. So, finally, I like to, basically just say, removing the dock is removing an opportunity for a developer to come in. Nobody's going to come in. Freight has to come across, employees. So I'm hoping there's some way to work this out that can help. And I'm asking for your help. Our homeowners are asking for your help. Thank you very much.
Scott Smith, I'm sorry.
Brings back memory of my basketball days with the shot clock. Well, I was played before the shot clock, but at any rate, my name's Scott Smith. I appreciate this opportunity to speak before you. I'm an owner of a beach cottage located at 131 Avenue of the Oaks on the Fusky. And I oppose the condemnation proceedings regarding the Melrose Landing property, and I appreciate the actions you've taken this evening to postpone what was coming up on the agenda tonight, and to allow the parties to have some time to iron out their differences, because this is very, very important to me and the people that live around me. A functional dock on the Fusky is imperative for everybody that's involved, the public to come in and go out, to get materials in and out. It is literally the financial and operational linchpin of our community. And this issue has to be resolved. It's also a key asset if you're purchasing property and you want to sell it. You've got assets and liabilities, and goodness knows we've got plenty of liabilities on that island around this old resort. But this dock to the developer is an important asset, and to see that go away could adversely impact what he's got or they've got to develop. If this issue can be resolved, we've got the ability that property values will increase, job creation will occur, and we're also going to have a larger tax base that you can work off of. And I think that's important for everybody. The developer has demonstrated goodwill, which often in these proceedings don't come to light, but I'd like to highlight some of these. That they have worked to assist local contractors in obtaining approvals and licenses that are necessary. I better get this shot off. They've provided manpower to renovate business locations and to comply with local codes. They've improved the property dramatically by cutting unsightly weeds, cleaning out the old hotel and beach property. The condemnation will slow or possibly could eliminate the deal, which nobody wants to see, and I would appreciate what you have done and what you will continue to do, I'm sure, to bring this issue to some resolution. It's important. Thank you very much.
Grant McClure?
Hey, good evening, Council and Chairman. I'm Grant McClure. I'm here representing the Coastal Conservation League. I started as the South Coast Project Manager back in May. I'm going to be talking tonight about the green space halfpenny. I'm here to recommend that the Council consider adopting a halfpenny for green space. We strongly support placing that penny on the ballot this November. This new source of conservation funding will complement but be distinct from existing rural and critical lands programs, in part because the funds can be used in adjacent counties where the benefits of conservation will still be experienced locally. An example of this, just last night, I was out on the Broad River after the storm passed, and I was on the Beaufort side and crossed over to the Jasper County side in about 2 or 3 minutes. So we know that Beaufort County residents support conservation, and we're asking you to consider the success of the Rural and Critical Lands Program. It's protected pristine landscapes from development through the years, and the green space halfpenny is an opportunity to expand upon that success and scale it in a way that's more appropriate to balance out regional growth pressures. A halfpenny for green space does not favor one municipality or region over another. For example, working with our land trust partners, we've identified several tracts of land in northern Beaufort County, as well as southern Beaufort County and throughout the region that would be appropriate for this program. I would encourage you all to review the South Carolina Conservation Bank's priority model, which maps out areas of high conservation priority versus those that might be more suited for development, as a good tool, and consider incorporating some similar tools within the ordinance to help guide the committee that would be responsible for sort of steering how that money is spent. We know that many environmental and quality of life issues transcend jurisdictional lines, for example, traffic and water quality, and that makes a regional green space penny especially pragmatic. Beaufort County is uniquely positioned to be the leader here because this is the first time that a green space halfpenny would be in place. We're experiencing unprecedented levels of new residents, conversion of forests and wetlands to rooftops, and this is in spite of some significant vulnerability to rising sea level, to flooding, to stormwater challenges, and increased frequency of storms. Just want to end by saying now is the time to act, and Council can give Beaufort County the option to implement this new tool. I think would be great. Thank you.
Chuck Newton.
I'm not as tall as Grant. I don't have to worry about the microphone. Good evening, Chairman, members of Council. I sat here a little bit earlier listening to Tom Davis and Shannon Erickson. I was very jealous, wishing that they were speaking out on behalf of Ladies Island and the Ladies Island plan. They were very articulate. I think the proposal is an interesting one, but I fear that we risk falling prey to policy ADHD, looking at these two referenda issues. It was 5 years ago that Designing Ladies Island was held, attracting about 500 people at Ladies Island Elementary School and sort of demanding that something be done about traffic and development issues on Ladies Island. That was 5 years ago. In 2018, we passed a $30 million referendum to deal with some of these traffic improvements. So far, we have a right turn lane at Walgreens to show for it. because the entire program was under budgeted for all kinds of reasons, we're forced to wait until we somehow find the remaining $41 million to complete these 10 projects. Transportation referendum was an obvious route to this end, and so was a raise grant from the federal government that has been applied for, but we don't have any confidence that any of this money is going to come through. The lag on these traffic improvements is having a real impact on Ladies Island. We're seeing parcels developed out from underneath us before these road projects are completed, and we have less of an opportunity to guide and manage the development that's taking place because we have to first decide where the roads go. A couple of significant impacts if we have to choose between these two proposals. Number one, the obvious one is that Ladies Island has to be put on the waiting list one more time. And I remind you, it's, Ladies Island is not some hamlet, but in population, the largest single unincorporated jurisdiction in the county. Bigger than Beaufort, bigger than Port Royal. Second impact is that traffic on Ladies Island continues to get worse and development continues apace, complicating our ability to follow through on a very well thought out Ladies Island plan that you approved unanimously. And if it happens, will benefit every corner of Beaufort County north of the Broad. The last impact, and I think the most important, is voter reaction to the referendum process. If we can casually ask taxpayers, as we did in 2018, to put up $30 million, and then just as casually say, well, we have other plans, all referenda, and county government, I think, will lose credibility. Not just referenda fatigue, but referenda cancer. Thanks very much.
Mike Tomey?
Thank you, Chairman and County Council. I'm Mike Tomey. I'm going to not reiterate everything that Chuck had said, but I totally agree with it. I think that Alice Howard had some very good points. I have been involved and chairman of the Planning Commission, chairman of the North Regional Plan Implementation, and chairman of the Ladies Island Civic Center Task Force. And we've spent with the task force and other members now 5 years in the planning process. The planning process is continuing, but it can't continue until we resolved the access roads in 21. The traffic in Beaufort County is at a breaking point, and it's just getting worse. And unless we can resolve some of the issues that we have in front of us, we're still going to be in more trouble in 2 more years when we can maybe look at a transportation referendum again. I really think that we need to consider strongly the transportation referendum. I'm not against green space at all. Members of the Open Land Trust and really believe in all those things too, but our transportation is at critical mass and we really do need to do something about it. Thank you very much.
Brennan, I understand there are some people on Zoom who wish to make comments. Do we know who they are and what they want to talk about?
Brenna, it would be Leanne Coulter if they're there.
I see a Laura Smith. I see a Laura Smith, but I don't see anyone else online.
Yeah, she's not on there.
County Council, yes, I am actually on the line. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'll be very brief. I just want to reiterate all the points about Melrose. I am a Melrose property owner and have been for 15 years. It's very disturbing watching what is happening. I'm pleased to know that we are moving forward with continued conversation, and my hope is that you'll listen to the developer who has a vision for Melrose to bring enhancements, opportunity for not just Melrose, but for the entire island and for Beaufort County. And I thank you for the opportunity to continue working together. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will end the first citizen comment section and move on to the liaison and committee reports. Are there any members of council who wish to give a committee report? That would be a first. Okay. Moving on, I would like a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda item. Mr. Rodman makes the motion for the consent agenda item. A second, please.
I will second the motion.
Ms. Howard makes the second. This will be done without objection, and I see no objections. Item number 13 is a public hearing and approval of a resolution authorizing the county administrator to execute any and all documents necessary to accept conveyance of the real property identified as TMS number R200 14 Whitehall. May I have such a motion?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Glover makes the motion. A second, please.
I second the motion.
Ms. Howard makes the second. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item? It's actually a pump station that we're getting approval for conveyance. Mr. Hervishon?
Okay.
You're so happy about this, right?
Excited.
Very excited. I see that there are no objections. I've closed the public hearing. There are no objections, and item number 13 will be approved. Item number 14 is the approval of a resolution to correct a Scrivener's error in an existing ordinance. Those of you in the audience who don't know what a Scrivener area is, Scrivener's error is oops, we made a mistake. And now we are going to correct that mistake. So may I have a motion for the approval of such a resolution?
Make the motion.
Mr. Lawson makes the motion. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Cunningham makes the second. Motion and second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, this will be approved without objection. Item number 15 is a second reading of an ordinance for a 2022 county green space sales tax referendum. May I have such a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cunningham makes the motion. May I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Hervishon makes the second. Duly motioned and seconded. The purpose of our discussion now is not what will be the essence of moving forward. We've heard a lot of information that we need to digest. The purpose of this is so that we can get the appropriate information we need to have a public hearing and third reading on this. So any discussion will be around what you've heard, what you think we should do before we take a vote. So, Mr. Cunningham, you made the motion. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Like I said earlier, I just think it's time that we put our money where our mouth is, and when I say that, I mean, we talk about trying to slow the growth in Beaufort County. This is actually an action of doing that. Instead of adding roads and adding to other areas, I know a lot of people say, well, we need to fix the roads. 100% agree. But until we can stop the growth, we're just chasing the tail over and over and over again and asking for more money and more money to fix the roads, build new roads. This is an actual tool and a plan to slow down the growth, buy up some of the houses that could be built in the future to lower that density. And it's actually putting the brakes on some of the growth in Beaufort County. It is a new tool. We would be the first ones to try it. Wouldn't be the first time we've done something the first, and we might win, we might lose, but at least we're putting our foot forward. So I do support this. I will oppose the transportation tax coming up after this because I don't believe we should come for two referendums in the same year. I do think the negotiation should be open for how much and how long. I'm more inclined to go for a 4-year at a full penny instead of 10 years at a half a penny, just because that 4 years will give us the trust in the public to say, hey, look, we tried this program. This is what we have to show for it in this short period of time. If we go for the full penny for those 4 years, we come up, if I did the calculations correct last time, it's like $70 million less than if we did the 10 years. But we're doing it in 6 years less. And I think that will be able to put some action into place. And at the same time too, if it's successful, then we can decide if we want to move forward with these type of programs in the future, or maybe transportation tax is the right way to go. And that gives us the time frame instead of waiting 10 years to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Howard, you were the second. Any comments?
I did not make the second.
Hervashon.
Hervashon, I'm sorry, I put H down and just said Howard. Hervashon.
It's okay.
Mr. Hervashon.
I think the analogy we used was making omelets or something like that.
Yes.
I'm all about making omelets. It's great. As I said last time Senator Davis was here, I view this in part as a tax reduction strategy. It will put less pressure on our infrastructure, which I think is a good thing. That leads to public safety, which I think is a good thing. We've had experience with the Rural and Critical Lands Program successfully. So I think that I think this is a good program. I think it's a good tool, and I think that Beaufort County would be well advised to put this in place in our toolbox.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson?
Yes, I'm going to support it. I like the fact that we are asking, as the half-cent sales tax, we're asking our visitors to pay at least 40%, I think is what has come about to help us pay for our green space and to put money aside. So again, I am all for this to move forward. We had Senator Davis here who assured us that we would be the ones that set the committee up, that we would be the ones that make the final decision. So again, it'll still be in our hands to do that. I think it is a tax reduction because again, then we could not have the rural and critical lands, which again is a tax that we all pay currently. And actually, I think it's going to help northern Beaufort County more than it helps Bluffton and Hilton Head. Those are places that there's not a lot of land left. So it's going to be the areas of northern Beaufort County that are rural right now that are going to actually get the most benefit from this as we protect lands and keep them from development in the future.
Ms. Howard.
Mr. Chairman, I've already expressed many of my concerns about this. I will not vote for this at this time because I feel there's too many questions and I don't think we have all the ingredients for our omelet that we know for sure. To go back to that simple analogy, which is this is not simple by any means, but I will not vote for this at this time until we get more answers on how we're going to implement it. I think our Rural and Critical Lands Program, I know for a fact, has been nationally recognized by many organizations. We have that tool. We have other tools such as our zoning in our county and in our municipalities, and we also have an outstanding stormwater program where we can work with resiliency. I'm just not sure this is the right time for this. The transportation tax provides us with the Greenbelt, and it has proven successful in Charleston, and I think we should do that. And then in 2 years, when all the things are worked out with this particular legislation, maybe we can pass it then.
Mr. Glover? Comments?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I do have comments. You know, I do support green space. There's no question about that. But the greenest man that I know in the Low Country basically said that to me several years ago when he retired, Dana Beach. Plan infrastructure. Plan whatever you do, make sure you plan for infrastructure. And how do you balance that? And that's where I am right now. I'm trying to balance infrastructure, green space. And I can't see, I don't want to do one without the other. So I'm actually in favor of both, even though the infrastructure may be reduced, the amount. I'm in favor of moving this forward with both, even though it's a separate referendum, with both, and let the public decide whether they would support both or not. But we have to have infrastructure, and Jared came before us and told us to dream and to travel the road less, or the road less traveled, Jared. And I think we need to be there to make sure that we're going on the right path. I don't want to leave infrastructure out, so that's where I am. When it's time to vote, I will vote based on my conscience at that moment. But right now, I gotta support both, and I'm hoping that we do support both.
Mr. Rodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. As I've reflected on this, we actually need to do both, and the question becomes, how do we do them and how do we size them? The green piece that Senator Davis spoke to is an opportunity for a whole bunch of reasons. And interestingly, back of the envelope calculation, if I did it correctly, if we build out the platted units in Bluffton and add a few in the northern part of the county, and Hilton Head's built out anyway, we're going to double the population of Beaufort County. And so it's time that we do something about it. Secondly, from a transportation standpoint, Jared had what he called sometime back the Beaufort Billion, which was really $1.25 billion, which was looking at the roads that we need over the next 10 years. So even the referendum we've been talking about is only half of what we need. And I said a couple weeks ago when this first came up, and I understand the problem putting both on the same one, but it's a matter of how we get there. But I really believe at the end of the day, we need the full penny on the transportation, and we need the full penny on the green space for all the reasons that we've talked about. I'm not clear what actual version of the green one is on the table at this point in terms of number of years and the size of.
We haven't decided that yet.
Okay, well, it seems to me that if we're at second reading, we need to decide that. Otherwise, when we do decide that, we're back at second reading because it's a material change. So we can't literally make that change at third reading. To me, I think we're at a point where we need to size that. And the actual referendum has to go to Columbia when? Sometime in August?
Yes, August 15th.
August 15th? And do we have a council meeting?
August 8th.
August 8th. So, I think this is important enough. We may need to schedule one or two more council meetings to get through this. But clearly, I think we got to decide before we pass anything at second reading.
Okay. Online, Mr. Somerville, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is threading the needle in my mind. I've given it a tremendous amount of thought. I really appreciate the efforts that our legislative delegation, particularly Senator Davis, had put into this. There's no question in my mind we need infrastructure, but dealing with just infrastructure, in my mind, is dealing with the symptom rather than the problem. The problem is continued growth, accelerated growth, rapid growth, overgrowth, and the solution, of course, or the ostensible solution, is to keep building more roads. But the problem is it becomes a self-perpetuating problem. You build more roads, more people come, you build more roads, never ends. So this whole business of conservation has to be one of the tools that we use to actually deal with the problem itself and not just the symptoms. There are other potential solutions that are a little more draconian, such as downzoning and temporary moratoriums that run under certain circumstances. And I wouldn't want to ever give up any of those things, but I particularly, we all agree on the preservation part. I mean, there's been a lot said tonight about how effective our Rural and Critical Lands program is. It's a tremendous amount of support. So one of the questions that I'm asking myself is, if this is in either or situation, where you put in infrastructure or do we put in green space? Of course, the infrastructure is a hybrid, it does both. The green space, of course, would be a separate referendum. I think, this is just an opinion, I think, and you heard some of the residents, these are my residents on Ladies Island tonight, speak about the fact that we had a referendum in 2018 for infrastructure and only one of 9 of those projects is built out, which is true. There are reasons for that. It wasn't because we ignored it. It wasn't because we weren't concerned about it. It's because you build anything of any consequence today in Beaufort County or anywhere else in these great United States of America, it takes time to get the permitting, to do the engineering, and to deal with the folks in the area. There's always going to be people who don't like whatever you do. There's going to be a group of people who are opposed to it, and they're going to be vocal about it. So you have to deal with that. So all of the projects in the 2018 referendum in my district, for example, are underway. Some are well underway. But that doesn't satisfy the constituents because they want to see the finished product. Well, I wish it were that simple. It's not. But my point is that the mere fact that we had a referendum in 2018, which we haven't completed, with that in quotation marks, because it's factually true, but structurally that's just the way it works. It takes a long time to get these projects done. Are going to be reluctant to vote for another transportation referendum. So I suspect that if we put either one, if we just put a transportation referendum on there for a penny for whatever period of time, I'm not sure it would pass. I suspect that it would not pass for the reason I stated and perhaps other reasons. I do think that the chances of getting a Greenbelt referendum passed are significantly higher. Every year that ticks by, we're leaving $60, $70,000, $1 million on the table that we desperately need for transportation. We desperately need it for preservation. So I think another year shouldn't go by without us asking our voters to consider giving us that money, that 60 or 70 million, of which they only pay half, so we can either do Greenbelt or road construction. You heard Senator Davis was very candid tonight and talking about the fact that there is no guarantee, and I had this conversation with him as recently as yesterday, or day before yesterday. There is no reason, nobody can guarantee that we're going to get any money for road projects. Our legislative delegation is going to work hard for that. There's no doubt about that. The Southern, the Northern, they're working hard. They've already sent letters to the Secretary of Transportation, but we don't know, it is not known what that will accomplish. It may accomplish a little, it may accomplish a lot, it may accomplish nothing. We just don't know. So the transportation problem is not going to go away, and we certainly can't sit here today and take a vote under the assumption that all those transportation matters are going to be taken care of with somebody else's money, because we don't know that. We absolutely don't know that. So here's where I've come around to. I think that what's best for everybody is to go ahead and do a Greenbelt referendum, and I'm going to say 2 years for a full penny, and here's why. At the end of 2 years, we're going to have a pretty good idea of whether we're going to get federal money for the road projects that we need. We'll have a pretty good idea. Right now, we have no idea. 2 years from now, we certainly will. I heard somebody suggested 4 years. There's nothing sacred or sacrosanct about 2 years. It's just a thought that I had. But that'll give us $140, $120 million immediately for Greenbelt. So after 2 years, if it appears to us, whoever's sitting on this council in 2 years, that we're not going to get any federal money because it's all going to get sucked up by the interstates, built and projected, then we can put a transportation referendum on then with a Greenbelt component. So to me, that's the best way to go. If we're going to do a referendum, I don't think a half a penny, to me, makes no sense, because I don't think people are going to be deterred whether it's a half a penny or 1 penny. The only thing going to a half a penny does is it cuts down the amount of money that we can use for green space or traffic mitigation. So I'm going to listen carefully to everybody, and I hope somebody will agree with me. Maybe they won't. That we right now I think it's written 10 years. Shorten that way down. Make it a penny for Greenbelt. Go ahead with it with a clear understanding that either we're going to get money from the feds for these roads or we're not. If we don't, we're going to immediately put out a referendum for road projects in no later, I would think, than 2024, and bond it immediately and get on with it. In the meantime, we might get a little money to do some preliminary engineering and that sort of thing. It's a very complex problem, but that's my take on it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I agree with Paul. He and I did not have a conversation about this, but our thinking was very, very similar. I think that 2 years really solves a couple of problems, and when it comes time, I'll be happy to second that motion, Paul.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson?
Yeah, I appreciate Tom's concern for trying to curb and control the growth in the county, particularly in southern Beaufort County. But I think his green space initiative is a good one, but as with the transportation referendum as well as the green space referendum, I just think our timing is not right. I don't think this is the time to do it. I've said that on the transportation referendum, the one that failed. I said that on the one that we are ready to put forth, and I say the same thing about the green space referendum. For us to put it on referendum in 2022, I think is the wrong time. These referendum, in my opinion, I think they stand a better chance of the citizens passing it in 2024 rather than 2022. But nevertheless, I'm going to support it. I'm going to vote to go ahead and put it to the citizens and let the citizens make that decision for us.
Mr. McKellen?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I believe Mr. Rodman was correct that both areas need attention, transportation and preservation. I believe that our delegation is going to deliver those federal funds and that we'll be able to use that money for the transportation infrastructure, and importantly, with no tax imposed on our residents. I said earlier that I see this green space ordinance as an opportunity to do something positive to ensure there's no further deterioration of our environment, and I support it 100%. I've noticed over the past few years that whenever we have a question that we're really unsure of, we tend to ask each other, what are the other jurisdictions doing? Well, what's happening in Greenbelt? And what's happening in Spartanburg? And what's happening in Charleston? Well, I think it's about time that those jurisdictions said, why don't we check and see what's happening in Beaufort? And if we're able to pass this green space, we'll be setting a model for others to follow. Thank you very much.
My comments are this. We listened very carefully to our delegates, our delegation members, talking about the questions that we have posed and how they will get us the answers. I am a firm believer that we should go forward with a 22 referendum on green space. If in fact it does pass by our taxpayers, we do not begin collecting the money till the following May. Think about that. Time marches on. It is critical that we move forward. Yes, we are going to be out there, number one, doing something that nobody else has done. But we have the blueprint. We've done it before. We have Beacolt. We know what to do and how to do it. And I am sure that we can talk to them and the Coastal Conservation League about targeting properties that would fall under the green space referendum, because it is rural and critical lands. It is a taxpayer win twofold. Number one, we get to bond the money immediately and use the sales tax to pay that back, including the current debt that we have, which will reduce the taxpayer funds. Now, as to how long a period of time and how much money would we generate, I'm on board with Brian and Paul. This is a means and method of us starting the process. We would be the first ones. The legislation must be done in even years. We do it this year, we are successful, we show that it can be done. We know from what Rural and Critical Lands has done, coming before us to buy property, how long it takes. We've been talking about properties that have been 6 months to a year before they are eventually purchased or the rights are purchased. Therefore, we will be able to set the table for the future and then come back in '24, if necessary, to do it again. So I believe that we should move forward with the green space referendum. And if somebody wants to put on the table the time frame and the amount going forward, I think that that's appropriate as well. Do you agree, Mr. Attorney?
I think you're going to need more than that. I think you're going to need, if you look at the ordinance, you're going to need the percentage of a percent.
Yes.
You're going to need the maximum amount of time.
Yep.
You're going to need the maximum amount of money.
Yep.
And you're also going to, if you're going to include the issuance of bonds, then you must identify the principal amount of the bonds proposed to be authorized and the source of payments for those bonds, and, excuse me, if other sources of revenue will be used for procurement purposes. That's the way I read it. And I'm not sure, Senator Davis, do you agree those are the issues that are going to have to be addressed?
I think that's right.
Okay.
Specify the maximum amount that we intend to raise, the amount of bonds that debt of this, whether intending.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the question becomes, what amount of money over a 2-year period at 1 penny are you going to raise, and then what will that revenue stream amortize in terms of bond principal?
Precisely. Thanks.
Gotcha. Okay. Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brief statements for some of the things we heard. We're still debating about if we're going to move forward with this or not. Putting both on the referendum sounds like a horrible idea to me personally. If we would have started this process last summer for transportation, when some of us up here originally brought that up, I could see how that we'd have enough time to advocate for that and educate. But the lost sales tax that we decided to move forward instead failed by over 70-some%. That was for a reason. So I do still think the green space is the way we need to go. This gives us the opportunity to pull down from the state that doesn't directly hit Beaufort County residents with an extra tax for both of them. With that said, pulled the math and looked at the stuff that Senator Davis gave us. There's $35 million for 10 years, a half a penny, so that's an estimate of $35 million a year. A half penny. So if we did a full penny, we could estimate that at $70 million. At 4 years, that puts us at $280 million, which is a $70 million difference. If we were to put the cap on that at $300 million, that buys us an extra $20 million of cushion to hit the time before we do the cap, or we make an extra 20. And I think the 4-year actually works better if you look at the time frame, because yes, we do have to do it on the general cycle. So if that's the case, it would actually end at 4 years in 27, because if you're saying it has to go into May, that means we come back in 28, which still gives us the opportunity to be on that same timeline, but maximize our profits and the time to get the money from the state. So I will make that motion to change the time from 4 years, from 10 years to 4 years, from a half penny to a full penny with a cap at $300 million.
Second.
Okay. Now, there are a couple other things that we need there. We have the time frame. We have the amount to be raised. We now need to know if we are going to go out for bonding. And if we are, as you said, it would be for $300 million?
300.
Okay. And would be the source of payments? And what happens if we don't get that source of payment? What other means would we use to pay off the debt?
Mr. Chairman, I think that if I might.
Yes, go ahead, Brian.
Regarding the questioning of bonding authority, with the rural and critical lands money, we don't bond out the whole thing at one time. We bond it out periodically. So I think that the question of bonding the money could wait until after the election, until we see the results and make a decision about how to proceed.
Unfortunately, the way this particular statute came about. That's all part and parcel of that, Brian, that we have, yeah, we have to specify
You have to
that.
know now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it was an all-encompassing legislation that says this is what you must do if you're going to go forward.
And I think we can probably, depending on what council does tonight, we can probably work closely with our bond counsel to work out those arrangements and those details.
Yes, see, what we're doing is setting it up for the third reading, giving you all of what council would like to do so that we can appropriately have a third reading and public hearing to allow us to finalize everything.
So you're looking for a second to Logan's amendment?
We got one.
He's got it.
We do have a motion and a second on the floor for that. So it's 1 penny, 4 years to raise $300 million. And then we can work out the other details as far as, do we take all 300 million at once? If we do, how do we pay for those bonds? Is it going to be through the sales tax? And if the sales tax doesn't raise $300 million, how would we pay for the remainder that is not raised?
I think it'll be appropriate tonight for you all just to make a motion, as a part of your motion, that you would like to include the option for bonding in the question and give us a chance to
tell you exactly
refine that prior to third reading, but it needs to be a part of tonight's motion, I would believe, in order for it not to be a major change.
Okay with that
Yeah, with the option to bond, yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not sure I understand, Councilman Cunningham's logic at doing it at 4 years, Vice doing it for 2 years as suggested by Councilman, Somerville and it's discussed. I mean, does it preclude us from not doing anything for transportation for 4 years in that case?
When we get to transportation, you know.
You see why I'm asking?
No, I absolutely see why you're asking that, and I'm going to.
Explain why he suggested 4 years rather than 2?
You can do that.
Absolutely. I think it gives us enough time to get the money from the state and see if they're actually going to come through.
Instead of 2 years?
I would think so, because by the time we actually put this into place, we're looking into next spring. So that's already a year into what we want to put into place to give them the time frame. So we have to stick with the new ordinance that Mr. Davis put forward. It has to go into a general election. So chances of us coming back in 2024 on a transportation tax is very high. And I still think we could absolutely do it. I figured we were going to come forward with the transportation tax this year. But I think this gives us enough time to start the process and advocate for it and have it in place. And then you only have about a year to a year and 4 months, if I did that math correctly, a year to a year and 4 months of overlap if the transportation tax passes. And then we could realign them in 2024 and make them end at the exact same time if we gain the trust of the public.
One more question. You do realize that the transportation does include Greenbelt line?
I do.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to.
But it does, as written.
I would favor the 4, partly because if we do the 2, and then we go to do the transportation 2 years from now, then that precludes continuing the green one. So we're better off to have the 4, position ourselves to do 1 referendum 2 years from now in transportation.
Yeah, and by the way, if we do a 4-year referendum for the green space in 22, it would be up again in 26. We don't start collecting the money till the following May, but the referendum is on even years, so it could be in 26.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'll yield to the finance man.
I like your idea. I think that we're actually being too aggressive to try to get this passed in such a short period of time. I will vote for it, however, but I think because I think for some reason we start talking about a whole penny over 4 years. I look at us doing half a penny, 4 years, and I think that would go through much easier than the full penny you're talking about. And then I would expect that we would then come back and ask for a half penny for transportation in 24. So we're getting some on both. But again, I'll support your motion, but I think again we're being very aggressive and just assuming that people are going to pass this.
That's a fair point. Let me ask our attorney, if we pass this evening as proposed, which is a penny for 4 years, raising $300 million. When you do the analysis, administration, about bonding and say, well, it's going to be difficult in the marketplace to raise this, we might have to use general obligation bonds, or we may have to do money out of our surplus, and we want to make a change and say, based upon the information you told us, it's better for a half cent for the 4 years. At the public hearing and third reading, would that be significant enough that we would have to kick it back?
I would think if you're going down instead of going up, you're probably in better shape. And it's going to be a referendum question anyway. And so I think the way I would approach it with regard to the bonding is that you authorize the bonding up to the amount of the maximum amount that's to be gathered, whether it's 350, it's 350 over 4 years, but it ends up being gathered 350 over 2 years, it ends. But in any event, if you authorize the administration to explore funding that entire amount, then you can work that back down during third reading, I believe.
That's fair.
And increments as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
think that's
I'm open to
appropriate.
that, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate, and, I would tend to think we should be a little bit conservative in saying that, let's not do the 300 million, because then there is the possibility we can't collect all 300 million in 4 years, because you start in the following May and let it go for 4 years. So I would think that $280 million would be more appropriate.
Based off the actual 35 for half a penny, 70 for a full.
Yeah.
What were do we have the numbers of what we were pulling off for the full penny for the transportation packs originally?
60 a year.
60 a year?
Yeah, so that's 240 million.
And we were over how much by the time it ended?
An extra 15 million.
15 million?
Yeah, so.
It doesn't contemplate inflation either, just we collect more pennies per dollar because inflated prices is all.
Yeah.
And the growth of the economy.
Mr. Greenway, you look like you wanted to tell us something.
Don't ruin my night, Mr. Greenway. Don't do
No,
it.
it's not. I'm just,
We want omelets.
you all need to understand that, our biggest rural and critical lands purchase was $8 million.
Yep.
$300 million is
a lot of money.
Is a lot of money, and that's a lot of properties to buy.
Well, and that's a very important point, because if you look at the statute, the very last provision of the statute, it's different from the provision in the statute that relates to transportation sales tax ordinances. Okay, so let me start there. Under the current, under the one that we've had in 2018, revenue that is raised, if you have more revenue than you need for the projects, then that excess revenue pursuant to the statute has to be applied to retire debt services, okay? In the Act, and we're all working through this for the first time, okay? But in the Act, the very last provision says the state treasurer shall distribute these funds to the county treasurer in the county area in which the tax is imposed, and the revenues must be only used for the purposes stated in the enacting ordinance. So, to me, that means you got to spend this money on the preservation procurement. I mean, that's the only thing you can do with it. You can't use it to retire debt and whatnot. Now, the legislature may tweak this in successive years. I don't know, but you got to bear in mind that what you get together. It seems to me that the Act requires you to spend it all.
Mr. Chairman, motion to go past 8 o'clock.
Yes, there is a motion on the floor to go past 8 o'clock. May I have a second?
Second.
Duly motioned and seconded. Is there anybody who objects? Seeing none, we will be able to continue on. That is a very fair point. We know from the last time we collected money for rural and critical lands, it was $25 million 4 years ago. And we have not spent all of that money yet.
We have 15 million left, and we have 10 million
right
pending in applications right now.
So I lean towards what Paul and Brian first came up with, the idea of let's collect a specific amount of money. Let's show how we can do the entire process. And if we need more money, we can always go back to the voters. After 2
Question
years.
for Mr. Keaveney, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McKellen.
Hey, Mr. Keaveney, does that language in the ordinance also allow us to participate in density reduction in addition to buying land for preservation?
Yeah, well, the council needs to decide what methods it wants to exercise its preservation procurement. So the short answer is yes.
Yeah, there's 7 things the council can do. Doesn't mean they have to do them, but it allows them to do any one or multiples of the 7 things.
I would propose that we list all of those options, other than maybe leases, in the question, so that people will know that all of those are on the potential table, including density. But keep in mind that whenever you're buying density, you're buying that density right at pennies on the dollar versus the actual land, okay? So you're gonna be able to buy a lot of density for a lot less money than to buy outright land.
That's good news.
So it is good news.
That's great news.
Yeah. But again, that's why the $300 million number might be
A lot.
That's a lot of money to try to spend, and I'm not sure that there's no time frame in the act that I'm aware of that says when you have to spend the money by.
Right.
But I don't think the state legislature or our voters would like for us to stockpile $300 million and let it sit in account for an extended period of time to do this acquisition.
Right. Okay, so, Mr. Glover, and then we'll see if we can come to an agreement.
Well, I'm just going to let you know that I can't support this motion because it's leaving out the infrastructure part.
This is about green space, has nothing to do with the
When you're
transportation.
obligating a penny right now for green space, I don't see how you can get another penny from my constituents, which means we're talking about 2 cents at some point in time. That's what I'm, objecting to.
I hear you, loud and clear.
Chairman, Vice Chair
Joe,
Somerville
I've
had,
had hand up for a long time.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying to me, Paul?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will gladly support, whether it's 4 years or 2 years, whatever this body, the majority of the folks on this body want to do. But I will restate my reasons for 2 years. It's hedging a little bit. Because number one, we don't know how well we're going to do with this program. It has some lofty ambition to it, and it will probably be fantastic success. But we don't have a track record. And at the end of 2 years, we'll have a track record. So at the end of 2 years, if we have federal money for the roads, then we can extend this. If we don't, we can still do the roads with the Greenbelt component. And there's a lot of money in that which can be bonded immediately. So I'm concerned if we're not careful, we're going to lose some support for this by the folks who think that number one priority should be roads. And so I think we can have our cake and eat it too, but I think in order to do that, you have to abbreviate the period. Again, I'm going to say 2 years and I'll vote for it. But if 6 people on this body want to do 4, I'll happily vote for that.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion on the floor for, yes, I'm sorry.
We're still waiting on Chris to
Logan
adjust his second, though, for the bond.
Right.
The option of bond.
Getting to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you guys are still okay proposing it as a 4-year, 1 penny, raise X number of dollars, which I think we should change.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think Logan's logic with what he proposed was absolutely spot on. This is exactly what I was thinking. I think that to compare it to 4 years ago with the Rural and Critical program, I think we're playing different sports. I would view this as a hedge on the inflation that we've seen and that we may continue to see with the land values in Beaufort County for sure. I think if we're just buying density, then that's not necessarily green space. It's just less density. I don't know that that's really going to get us to where we need to be. I think probably where we should end up is buying more property. buying more land and actually holding it for actual true green space. I think that just as successful as the rural and critical program has been historically, I personally don't think that we're going to have a problem getting a penny passed for 4 years. I think that it also, in some respects, just what Logan said, it misaligns the transportation and the green space, so that we're not going back for 2 referendums at the same time, because I could see that being problematic. So just wanted to throw that out there. I totally support the logic that Councilman Cunningham shared.
Mr. Flewellen.
Yeah, I think it might be appropriate for Mr. Somerville to introduce his motion to amend at this point to reduce the time to 2 years. And we can have that discussion, Mr. Chairman, and that way make that determination, because quite frankly, I'm willing to see this be on the ballot in its current offered motion. I would prefer 2 years, but I would vote for 4. And so, Paul, would you like to make that motion so I can second it? I'll yield.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I second.
So you're 1 penny for 2 years.
Right.
To collect how much money?
140 million, and bond up to 140 million.
Okay.
It's simply a motion to amend, Mr. Chairman. I second that. So we'll, this won't have any bearing on the ruling regarding the primary motion.
No, I understand that.
One other point, some members of council have expressed an interest in deleting leases with options to purchase from the list of procurement options. So could I suggest that you might add that to the mix of
that was already added
of the amendment?
I didn't know that it had been amended. I never heard anyone say that.
I just thought I heard that.
Well, thank you. So long as the minutes are clear.
Yes.
Right.
The minutes will be clear. Senator.
I'll be here on that last point. I'm a little concerned in that the statute itself specifies the referendum question which must be posed, and that does list leases as one of the options.
Well, it does, but that section of 1020 subpart B, when it says 2 weeks before a referendum, a county's election commission must publish in a newspaper of general circulation the question that is to appear on the ballot, comma, with a description of the methods by which the county's governing body intends to procure the open lands and green space. So I think that gives council the ability to pick and choose. You think it doesn't?
I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I
Right.
heard Ms. Howard saying that leasing is not a preference.
Right.
I guess I would argue that the safeguard against that is Beaufort County Council doesn't have to approve it, and they're the ones with under authority. I just worry about deviating from the language of the referendum that's specified in the statute.
Right. I agree with you that if they include it, then they can choose what to do with it back and forth in the future. But I think it gives them the option at this point. But I mean, I'm indifferent to it.
Is that something that you could get some additional ruling on for us?
I can, and be happy to do that, whether or not, I guess the opinion would be, can a county decide in advance which of those procurement provisions they do not wish to have as alternatives? I'd be happy to make that.
Okay, perfect.
I don't think at the third reading, if we had to add it back in, that would be significant. Okay, so we have a motion and second on the floor to do a penny for 2 years to raise $140 million with the capacity of bonding up to that amount.
That's in opposition to the 4-year 1%.
That's correct.
No, sir, I believe it's a motion to amend.
Yeah,
I understand.
They amended that, so now we have to take that amendment, and if that amendment passes, it replaces the 4-year. If it doesn't, we're back to the 4-year.
Exactly.
Okay, is there any further discussion before we take action?
I would favor the 4-year for a couple reasons. One is I don't think it's any harder to pass the 4-year than the 2. Secondly, if we don't start the program until the spring of '23, we really haven't had enough time to demonstrate progress. And also then it would put us in a position that if we wanted to do the transportation penny in '24, then we would have two competing referendums again. So I think the 4 makes it more sense to me.
That was the exact same statement I was going to make.
I believe we can bond it. I believe we can bond it immediately. We don't have to wait till the revenue starts coming in to bond it.
So we can come up short on that bond.
We can get the money immediately, I think. If somebody knows something I don't know, then jump in there. But I think to say that we can't use the money till we can't bond it till.
Bond it, but that doesn't mean we'll raise it off.
Call the question.
Yeah.
You gotta service the debt till you start collecting.
Correct.
I wouldn't bond the entire thing because you won't need the entire thing
No.
up front. And
Right.
when you bond
Yeah.
sizable amounts of debts, your issuance
Right.
costs are greater.
So, and
you
that's
interest on
all
entire
the stuff that administration can come up with.
And that's why I still support the 4-year. I do think they should be stagnated if we have any chance of doing transportation and this in the future together.
Okay.
And maybe the 300 million is enough to last us 10 years. And we knocked it out of the park. We're good. 10 years, we showed everybody this is how we were able to bring down the density and buy up the land.
All right.
And that gets us going. But I would still oppose the 2nd year and I push for the 4-year.
All right, the amendment on the floor, we're going to vote now. Everybody understands what it is? 1 penny, 2 years, 140 million, bond for it. Okay. Mr. Somerville, you made the motion, you get to vote first.
Yes.
Mr. Flewelling,
Yes.
Brennan, would you call the rest of the people?
Sure. Vice Chairman, sorry.
Vice Chairman Somerville was first? Is
Yes,
that correct? Okay.
yes, and then Mr. Flewelling voted next.
Councilmember Glover.
Yes.
Councilmember Hervishon.
No.
Councilmember Rodman.
No.
Councilmember Howard.
Yes.
Councilmember Lawson.
Mark Lawson, no.
Councilmember McEllen.
No.
Councilmember Dawson. Don't see him online anymore.
Okay,
Councilmember Cunningham
No.
and the chairman.
I'm a yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's now 5-5, which would mean it would be defeated if Mr. Dawson is no longer online.
I'll have to check again.
I don't see him on
I
there.
don't see him online.
Can we take the call for the 4-year in the meantime?
Well, you know, it failed, so now we're at the 4-year.
Yeah, so we can call that question?
Yep. Okay, so now we're back to the original motion. 4 years, 1 penny to raise, how much?
300 million.
300 million. And
The option to bond.
And with the option to bond. Okay. And Mr. Cunningham, you begin. So Brennan, would you call the roll? Mr. Cunningham goes first, Mr. Hervishon goes second, and then the rest of us vote.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Cunningham.
Yes.
Councilmember Hervishon.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Somerville.
Yes.
Councilmember Glover.
No.
Councilmember Rodman.
Yes.
Councilmember Howard.
No.
Councilmember Lawson.
Mark Lawson, yes.
Councilmember McEllen.
Yes.
Councilmember Flewelling.
Yes.
And the chairman.
Yes, that is successful, 8-2. Okay. So administration knows their marching orders to put together for the 3rd reading. Okay, motion and second, please, for a second reading of an ordinance for a 2022 streets, roads, bridges, and green belts sales tax referendum.
I'll make a motion.
Ms. Howard makes the motion.
Second.
Mr. Glover makes the second. Who wants to go first?
I'll just make a quick comment. I think this has been well thought out, and it does include Greenbelt. and we can implement it and we can do it. And there's too many questions without mentioning the other one, on the other one. So, we need this throughout the county. It benefits everyone. The roads are failing. It's a safety issue, plus we get the Greenbelt. That's my only comments.
Mr. Glover?
Beaufort County has been a leader for years, and I think in spite of what is happening at the state and the federal level, Beaufort County has been a leader, and I think we continue that effort by showing and demonstrating that we desire to lead. I think Jared said that we need originally for 10 years $1 billion, and we didn't know how that $1 billion was going to get here for the 10 years, and this is a start toward that effort. So I'm going to stand with what I think and know can happen in Beaufort County, and if the state or the federal government comes in, so be it. So that's why I'm standing.
Okay, let's go online this time first. Mr. Somerville.
Is this for a vote or a comment?
Comments first before we vote.
Okay. Well, I'm not clear. I have to look at it again, what the length of this as it's currently written is.
We haven't said it yet.
Okay, well,
it was 10 years, $700 million as the recommendation from the TAC. But County Council has not voted that that's exactly what we're going to do.
That's your motion?
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I just kept it.
there are certainly folks out there that are going to support one over the other. And so at this point, I will support it. Whatever numbers we put in there. I'm not going to make a suggestion right now, but whether duration and amount, I'll wait for somebody to make a motion on that.
Okay. Mr. McKellen.
Yeah, I stated earlier that I believe that our delegation is going to deliver those federal funds to us. However, I'd like to move this along to a third reading and wait to see what develops between now and our next council meeting with regard to those assurances we're getting from the Secretary of Transportation and the members of our delegation with regard to how they expect those federal dollars to be allocated and delivered to us. I'm voting yes to move it along to 3 in the event there is no assurances received that we're ever going to get that money.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that we should provide an opportunity for our state delegation and even our federal delegation to deliver on the promise to help us fund those projects. And I think it's premature for us to put a question before the voters at this time without knowing what kind of support that's going to be. So I'm going to vote no.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson?
After hearing Mr. McKellen, I will actually vote yes for it. However, I think the timing is bad now that we've passed a green space. So, I mean, my gut feeling is that, yes, we need transportation money. However, I don't think we'd ever pass both of them in the same election cycle. But as Mr. McKellen said, I'll vote yes to move it forward to a third reading, which at that time I most likely will vote no.
Mr. Hervishon.
Thank you. I've been all over the map on this. I didn't vote for it the last time. I was going to support it when we put the Greenbelt in. Now that we've taken the Greenbelt as a standalone, I definitely think that there's more of a sense of urgency on the Greenbelt than there is on the transportation. I'd like to see the various delegations take a crack at getting us some funding. So for consistency purposes and for all those other reasons, I'm going to be a no again tonight.
Mr. Glover?
Not spoke already. Yeah.
Ms. Howard, do you want to say any other thing?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Rodman?
Mr. Chairman, I will be a no on this. I'm a strong proponent of the need to do a transportation referendum, but I don't believe we can have competing ones at this point in time. And the other piece that I would offer is we're not going to be much smarter about what the state can do in a couple weeks, much less a couple months, as to what can happen. And here's what I think. There's two things here. One is I do believe with the amount of federal money that is flowing, that we will be a recipient of some of that. And as I've said in the past, it's not a matter, I don't believe, of our delegations, Washington or locally, just take a list and go in and say, okay, we're going to put some money here. What we've got to do as Beaufort County is identify those 3 or 4 major projects that we want to do, and we've got to come up with the money to start the engineering so that we're in the pipeline for both the feds and South Carolina, and so we look shovel ready. I think failing to do that, we will be unsuccessful with getting that flow of money. So, but I do believe if we were to do that, then I think we will be well positioned for a penny referendum in 2 years on transportation.
Mr. Cunningham.
I think Mr. Rodman hit it out the park. It's the same belief I have. If we're going to go behind one referendum, let's go back to the public now and let's let them know that we're pushing forward with this. We got put behind the 8 ball once before. I said let's not do it again. Let's let the delegation, the state know we're ready to move forward with their help and get that opportunity. So I will oppose this.
The public is a very astute group of individuals. If we go out for a transportation referendum as well as a green space referendum, the way the TAC has proposed this for 10 years and $700 million, in there are duplications. One, we just passed the green space. The Greenbelt is a duplication of that. So that's money that would be duplicated. And I'm not sure that our taxpayers will want us to do that. Number 2, I have been adamant about the idea we should not have Beaufort County citizens paying their hard-earned money in tax dollars for a referendum for major roads that are the responsibility of the state of South Carolina because there are evacuation routes, which are part and parcel of what the TAC has come up with. And that's why we went to them and said, what can you do to get us money? We don't know how much it's going to be, but regardless, it should not be part of a transportation referendum. We have learned several lessons, hard lessons, from our various referendums that passed in 2006 and 2018 as to what we said we were going to do and what we actually accomplished. We have a way, a means, and a method of doing something different this time. When you looked at the TAC's proposal, what they came up with was some specific projects. But those specific projects require the development of a plan, an engineering plan. You need money up front to do that. We were wrong in 2006. We were wrong in 2018 by not having a plan developed ahead of time, the engineering done. We have a way of doing it now. This referendum that we're going to propose should not be done in 22. It should be done in 24 or 26, allowing us to spend money to, 1, create the engineering that we need for the specific projects that we would get out for, and number 2, to do some projects that are on that list right now that will show the taxpayers of our community, this time we got it right. This time we know what we're doing. This time we're going to be able to show you that we're spending your money wisely. So I am a no.
Where would you get the money to do the engineering?
We have some means and method, and administration could be targeted to say, could we do some of it under our 8% borrowing capacity?
That's millions and millions of dollars for engineering and design work that we do not have any way to fund unless you are willing to raise property tax.
Well, I'm not willing to raise property taxes, but we could go out.
That's the reality of the situation of what you all are doing. We have some money that we can program. And, you know, I apologize, but you guys pay me to say the tough things to you.
Absolutely, that's why we're here.
Needs to be said. There's some money to do some engineering work on road projects without a funding source to do the actual project. But we've got a lot of needs in this county that, because of deferred issues from past administrations, we've got recreation needs. We're doing a recreation study. We got a facilities master plan that's coming up. We've got infrastructure issues. We've got finishing up, got to find the money to finish up our 2018 projects. We've got to go back to the state and to the federal government and ask for millions and millions of more dollars to do what is being requested to be done on Highway 278 with the bridges down there. You know, we do have money, but we don't have unlimited resources. So I agree with the approach of saying we got to have a plan. You've got a plan. One of the things I would ask you all to do this evening, as you vote this item down, is that you all make it very, very clear, abundantly clear, that you appreciate the work that the volunteers who served on that Transportation Advisory Committee put in, because they worked every week for 6 or 8 weeks to put, maybe longer, to put this plan together. And all of that was tracking to at least something that happened with transportation. And then one night, someone shows up and all of that's put to bed for something that I still, as county administrator, don't have any idea if it's going to work appropriately or if it's going to be feasible, or if we're going to have Columbia dictating what properties we buy in the next couple of years. I know what was said, but what was said and what's in actuality is two different things. So we can all read the question, we can all read the legislation. We've got letters saying that this is the way you interpret the legislation. But we also have that with the Burns case that the Supreme Court put us in a tailspin on last year as well with the road user fee. So.
Okay, so before us is a motion and second for a second reading for a 2022 tax referendum. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Howard,
Yes.
Councilmember Glover,
Yes.
Vice Chair Somerville,
Yes.
Councilman Herbishon,
No.
Councilmember Rodman,
No.
Councilmember Lawson,
Mark Lawson, yes.
Councilmember McEllen,
Yes.
Councilmember Flewelly,
No.
Councilmember Cunningham,
No.
and Chairman.
I'm a no. So it looks like it's 5-5. That motion is defeated. That doesn't mean that it is done. It's defeated as a 22 referendum.
Mr. Chairman, could I make?
Yes, go right ahead.
Let me just say, I'm troubled. And the reason I'm troubled is not because of what is happening here locally, but what is happening at the state level and at the federal level. And I don't have the votes for my region. I need this council as a whole to support my region. And if that's not happening, I can see things happening south of the Broad, but not north of the Broad. I have just as much problem north of the Broad that you have on south of the Broad. when highways are blocked for 4 hours, it stopped everybody north of the Broad. And that's been happening more and more frequently. And I just need I need this council to recognize that small areas need help too. Thank you.
I hear you loud and clear. I don't think a $700 million referendum this November is going to be successful. And if it isn't, then we're really behind the 8 ball. Okay. Item number 18, second reading of an ordinance to appropriate funds in order to establish public ownership of real property located in Helmsman Way, Hilton Head Island. May I have a motion for that item?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rodman made the motion. Who made the second? Mr. McCollum?
Yep.
Discussion. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, this item will be approved without objection.
No, sir, I object.
You object. So it is approved, but it is 9 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
2, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, 2.
All right? Got that? Will be 2 objections. So it's 7, 2, 1 absent.
My apologies.
That's okay. Item number 19 is approval of the updated 2022.
Mr. Chairman, 1 absent.
8-2. That was 8-2.
Didn't I say that?
You said 7-2.
721?
You said
8-2-1.
1 absent.
Oh, 821 absent, yeah. It's my math skills.
And I think Councilmember McGowan.
Yeah. Okay, I need a motion for the approval of the updated 2022 council and committee meeting schedule.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cunningham makes the motion. Second.
Second.
Mr. Hervishon makes the second. Any comments? Questions? Seeing none, this will be approved without objection, and I see no objections. Any citizen comments at this point in time?
There is someone online, Leanne.
Miss Leanne, did you have a public comment?
She was supposed to be on earlier to speak again.
Yes, I didn't realize, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I thought once the agenda item for the Fusky Island Ferry was removed from the agenda, I misunderstood and thought that there would be no public comment on that. And so I was at work and came home and missed that. So thank you very much for offering me to speak. I had Mr. Freddie Grant with me at the Merrifield School today. He is a native islander, and he has been asked, along with some other native islanders, not to use the Melrose Landing dock for fishing and crabbing. So I wanted to just set that. He has gone home. But I want to just bring it to the council's attention that I and the community in the historic district, of the individuals that I've spoken with, are in full support of of Beaufort County acquiring the property as known as the Melrose Dock for public use. A permanent location for an embarkation center on the Fusky Island and on Hilton Head will give the community a sense of security. Everyone, again, as I've spoken to in the historic district since it was passed 2 weeks ago, has expressed nothing but excitement about the county's purchase of both docks. The group that's interested in managing the dock came to the island expressing a desire to be a part of the community. As the residents have seen so far, is that the parking for residents have been limited. We've been moved to the back area of a grassy area of the field. There currently is no handicap parking. The management group has also started to charge small businesses up to, as been indicated, 25% of their sales. No small business can afford to pay that kind of usage fee. The managing group, as I've stated, has also banned native islanders, the Gullah men, from fishing and crabbing on the dock. And it is the feeling of this community that we would like the county council to continue to proceed with the purchase of the Melrose dock for the purpose of public use. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and again, I totally misunderstood the process and the procedure, so thank you for this time to offer that comment.
Thank you. Anyone else for a comment? Seeing none, is there any other action to come before council?
Omelet time.
Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Tom was a omelet.
Well, Sandra.